For instance, Song Ziming saw a mecha that had removed that conspicuous 203mm heavy cannon, and its number of guns was greatly reduced, but it gained a long, fleshy tail covered in scale armor, just like a scorpion's tail. Another example was a mecha whose upper part now bore rows of densely packed hexagonal holes, turning it into a heavy-duty long-range multi-barrel rocket launcher. This is the Scorpion Flame Sprayer mecha, and this is the Fly-type rocket cannon. The former has removed most of its weapons and is fully loaded with giant fuel tanks, capable of spraying fire dragons reaching up to 500 meters. The latter is equipped with a 48-tube multi-barrel rocket launcher, loaded with 48 rockets of 220mm, capable of firing all within 12 seconds, primarily used for long-range firepower coverage. Hao Guang briefly explained and added, "These new mechas were actually modified from the chassis of the Spider main battle mecha, enriching our tactical use." Vargas and Song Ziming were both amazed. JECA Group's progress was incredibly fast. In the past, there were also many cases where tank chassis were extended and modified into self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, self-propelled cannons, self-propelled rocket launchers, missile launchers, and so on. Because of the use of a universal chassis, it was extremely convenient for logistics and maintenance. Starting from Germany in World War II to the present, it has been learned and expanded by many countries. But wasn't JECA Group's large mecha just getting started? Even though the Spider main battle mecha had been developed, the speed of progress was still incredibly fast. The two did not know that behind these mechas, there was another world where a group of mechanical geniuses from the Puppet Hall were helping to solve general applicability and research and production issues. What appeared before them, based on the chassis of the Spider main battle mecha, were several unseen new models of mechas, dazzling Vargas and Song Ziming's eyes, deepening their understanding of JECA Group's progress in the mecha field. Vargas was most touched. The appearance of this universal mecha chassis indicated that JECA Group was now capable of mass production of main battle mechas, evident from the mechas being transported by train. The number of mechas here exceeded 300, forming a terrifying flood of mechas. Meanwhile, in their bear country, the annual production of new tanks was also only a few hundred units, and to acquire more tanks, they had to rely on refurbishing stock tanks, swapping walls to make repairs, and upgrading with modern modifications. The combat capability of mechas and tanks was clearly incomparable. A single tank in front of the Spider main battle mecha was like a large toy, only fit to be crushed, wholly inadequate for battle. Where in the world are these big fellows produced? Does JECA Group have such a large-scale industrial production base underground? Vargas was utterly puzzled. After the Spider main battle mecha appeared, many countries tried to locate JECA Group's mecha production facilities using satellites, but they could find no trace on the ground, which also thwarted Beautiful Country's plan to destroy the mecha production facilities by launching long-range missiles. People could only speculate that JECA Group's mecha production facilities were located in underground factories, as JECA Group's underground engineering was world-renowned. Over 300 large mechas drove off the station platform, and a special train was also coming. When the train came to a stop, a large group of steel camp soldiers wearing biological armor, 3 meters tall, disembarked and scanned the area for dangers. Following that, a man slowly walked out. It was Su Jie who had come for an inspection. "Salute! Greetings, Commander!" Hao Guang shouted, and instantly, the entire station echoed with the uniform sound of boots snapping to attention, and each mecha also turned towards Su Jie, with mecha pilots emerging from cockpits to salute him. At ease, Su Jie waved his hand, accompanied by Han Ruyan, and approached Hao Guang. Vargas and Song Ziming were startled on seeing Su Jie, unexpecting him to appear at the front lines of battle. The responsibility of your mecha troops in this operation is crucial. Strive hard and fight valiantly. Su Jie patted Hao Guang on the shoulder, encouragingly said, "Yes, Commander. Rest assured, our mecha troops will not disappoint you." Hao Guang responded with utmost respect, and behind him the mechanical army roared in unison. "Use me for the first battle, and I will conquer the enemy." The sound was thunderous, like surging waves, with a momentum like a rainbow. Song Ziming marveled inwardly, looking at Su Jie with both admiration and a hint of complexity, with inexplicable emotions. A Hua country person creating such a vast enterprise on his own, undefeated in battles across east and west, and even repeatedly humbling the Blue Star Dominator, beautiful country, was truly legendary. Song Ziming, who had participated in studying Su Jie's rise, sometimes even doubted if it was their own endorsement. But clearly, it was not. The opponent had made his own way in Southeast Asia. Including beautiful country, there had been similar doubts before, but as many new technologies emerged, they had to dismiss this thought. Because technological research often has iterations, and it's rare for completely new technologies to suddenly appear, and in the biological genetic field, Hua country clearly did not exhibit this characteristic. In contrast, Jekka Group's strong biological focus had been obvious from the start. Since they began selling insects, they must have already started genetic research, having a certain iterativeness. This is also recognized by the international community. Jekka Group's biological armor, genetic warriors, spider mecha, and those magical Tianyuan series special drugs are definitely linked to the acquisition of poison insects. Mr. Vargas, I apologize for the poor conditions here. It's not the best environment. Have you gotten used to the military camp life these days? Su Jie looked at Song Ziming and Vargas, extending his hand for a handshake. Not at all, Chief Su, you're being too polite. Song Ziming quickly straightened up and said with formality, Chief Su, we're not here for a vacation. In fact, I can even pick up a gun and go into battle if needed. Vargas patted his chest to show he was still capable of fighting. To him, this little discomfort was nothing. That's good to hear. The battle is about to begin. You will stay in the rear and see for yourselves how we will crush the Karamu defense line. Su Jie exchanged a few words with them, and at this point Hao Guang came over. Chief, please say a few words to everyone. They all want to hear you speak. Su Jie looked up at the eager eyes of the surrounding soldiers, nodded, and took the microphone from someone. All right, I'll keep it short. Chief, please come here. Hao Guang gave a meaningful glance to his son Hao Guyu, who understood immediately and maneuvered the spider mecha's front legs to reach out. Su Jie stood on them, and the spider mecha raised its front legs above the head level, placing Su Jie atop the mecha, using it as an elevated platform for his speech. Looking around at the soldiers and mechas, Su Jie spoke out loud. In the international community, we have just exposed the collusion between the Siam King and the beautiful country's CIA, but Siam continues its obstinate path, acting as the lapdog of the beautiful country, serving as a bridgehead to attack and interfere with Chan country. They even colluded with Anan, Jinla, and Lansong, 3 other lackeys, totaling 4 countries participating in the war against us. Su Jie's voice reverberated, stirring up indignation among many soldiers. The frontline soldiers were made well aware of the relevant evidence, and now the soldiers of the Jekka Group harbored a unified animosity. Those countries of Siam are too hateful, daring to invade us, acting as the lackeys of beautiful country, unforgivable. It's true, they falsely charged us with trying to assassinate the king, sparking the conflict. We must drive them out and protect our homeland. Drive out beautiful country. The soldiers were agitated. Under the relentless propaganda of Jekka Group, anti-beautiful country sentiment was surging within Chan country. Su Jie raised his hand to calm them, and the chatter instantly died down, the crowd falling silent as every soldier turned to look at him. When the noise subsided, Su Jie raised his right hand and then clenched it into a fist, beginning to speak in a furious tone. Beautiful country is relentless in its desire to exploit us. They attempt to buy off other countries, continually using geopolitical security to ensnare Jekka Group's development, aiming to choke the life out of our group. In the eyes of beautiful country, the world should revolve around them. Their position as the Blue Star Dominator should last forever. Their words should be the global truth, their standards the order of the world, placing them forever above other nations and peoples. Because their US dollar is the world currency. Their aircraft carriers roam the 7 seas. Their military bases, the globe, and they can easily topple the government of a small to medium-sized nation. But I don't buy it. We developed from weakness, not because of alms from beautiful country, but through our self-reliance and determination. Now that we have achieved some success, beautiful country and other Western nations want to dictate terms to us. claiming our existence is a danger to the international community, calling us savage and impolite. A bunch of barely evolved barbarians demanding we become their vassals, accept their economic colonization, and become their pawns. But why should we? Why should they be able to plunder our scientific achievements with clear conscience, to relegate us to the low-end industries they disdain, to demand we abide by their so-called civilized rules, to leech off us for life, forbidding us from truly standing up? This war is to openly tell those Western nations, tell beautiful country, tell those who label Jekka Group as savage and dangerous, if your civilization requires us to bow and scrape, then I will show you the pride of our savagery. For Chan country, for the people, for dignity, Jekka Group must prevail. Su Jie spoke with passion, his words forceful and compelling. Must prevail. Must prevail. Must prevail. The soldiers looked at Su Jie with fervent admiration, chanting cries of victory, rifles aligned, mechas standing tall, the atmosphere tinged with a religious solemnity. Oh, kill all those Siam lapdogs. How Guyu, looking at Su Jie's silhouette, felt goosebumps on his arms, boiling with passion. His respect and loyalty to Su Jie growing even more intense, willing to shed blood and lay down his life for this man without any hesitation. Click, click. The military photographers snapped photos, ready to report back and disseminate the inspiring speech to the entire army. Hurrah! Vargas also shouted excitedly, and Song Ziming looked at him askance, seeing the Mauzi joining in the chanting with the soldiers, his face filled with resignation. This man's reputation within Chan country is too high, almost mythologized. Song Ziming felt the fervent atmosphere and couldn't help but be moved. But then thinking about everything Su Jie had done for Chan country, domestically promoting economic growth, increasing the earnings of countless civilians by several times, while also eradicating a multitude of warlords and dark forces within Chan country, purging the long-entrenched maladies and ending over 70 years of civil war, unifying the entire nation and sparing the people from the torment of internal strife. Abroad, he established a formidable reputation, repeatedly winning against the intervention of the Eight-Nation Group led by Beautiful Country, instilling a sense of pride and dignity in the people of Chan country, who had just escaped poverty, towards the strength of their nation, evoking a spontaneous national pride. So it was reasonable for Su Jie to be revered like a deity here, by the people and the soldiers alike. 9 a.m. the next morning, the Jekka Group formally launched the Karamu Defense Line campaign, and with soaring morale they began with artillery, the king of war, to break the silence of the defense line. Deployed at the front line of the defense were 3 artillery brigades, plus the divisional artillery belonging to the Jekka Group, assembling a total of 400 cannons with calibers of 100 mm and above, along with a large number of multi-tube rocket launchers. The thunderous artillery fire echoed through the earth, soil was upturned, and fortifications crumbled. Siam soldiers could only open their mouths wide, shivering in the trenches and tunnels. From time to time, shells fell into the trenches, even collapsing the bomb shelters carved into the trench walls, scattering human limbs mixed with soil all around. Since they dominated the airspace, Jekka Group frequently deployed combat aircraft, leaving the Siam on the Karamu defense line no choice but to endure the bombings. Any hidden artillery that retaliated would be taught a harsh lesson by the aircraft overhead. The intense artillery continued for 2 hours, until 11 a.m., when the massive bombardment ceased. The main purpose of this bombardment was not actually to kill the Siam ground forces, but rather to clear the anti-infantry and anti-tank mines buried before the Karamu defense line. A large number of multi-tube rocket launchers carpet-bombed these minefields, clearing them out. The buried mines were detonated, blasting multiple safe pathways for the attack. Once the bombardment ended, the ground forces began to enter the defense line. Leading the charge, naturally, was the Mechanical Combat Brigade. The Jekka Group now had 3 Mechanical Combat Brigades, with over 300 large combat mechas, a portion of which were new models modified from the chassis of Spider main battle mechas. Hao Guang, the commander of the 1st Mecha Combat Brigade, personally appeared on the front line, driving his mecha and releasing 3 scout eye-worms to observe the opposing defense layout. The terrain of Chumphon province mainly consists of plains and hills, with the Siamese army building concrete barricades, digging trenches, and setting up coils of barbed wire at the battlefield frontline. Under guidance from the beautiful country, each of these trenches was reinforced with geotextiles, and they featured defense installations, underground shelters, and firing positions built with concrete. Compared to the previous defense lines breached by the Jekka group, Siam had put considerable effort into the current Karamu defense line, gathering their more capable forces here. They clearly couldn't afford to lose Chumphon province and were determined to defend it at all costs. They really put their heart into this. Hao Guang muttered to himself. Though this defense line was robust and extensively laid out, he still felt confident. All mechas, move in units and rely on mutual cover for the attack. Having issued the combat order, the ground began to tremble slightly as numerous main battle mechas took strides with their giant metallic legs, each maintaining hundreds of meters of spacing, rushing towards the enemy. In an anti-bombing shelter within a trench, a group of Anan and Siam soldiers were hiding from the artillery fire. The Siam soldiers were mostly pale and tense, constantly praying to Buddha for protection. Meanwhile, the Anan soldiers displayed a different demeanor. Though also very nervous, their condition was significantly better than that of the Siam soldiers. Look at you, it's just artillery fire. We're safe here. Even if the Jekka group has numerous shells, they can't possibly overturn all the soil here. I don't know what you're scared of. Ruan Qingfu held a cigarette in his mouth, wearing an Anan uniform covered in dust, unaffected by the artillery fire occasionally falling above, causing dirt and dust to shake off the ceiling of the shelter, making him look dirty. Still, he scorned the fearful appearance of these Siam soldiers. What's safe about here? After the shelling, the attack will begin. Our enemy isn't even human. A young Siam soldier, shivering uncontrollably and full of fear, spoke out. He was a retreated Siam soldier from the front line, regrouped here and mixed with Anan soldiers to man this area. What's up? Do the Jekka group soldiers have 3 heads and 6 arms? Don't they die just the same when hit by a bullet? Ruan Qingfu disdainfully blew a ring of smoke, thinking these Siam soldiers were of no use, already terrified by the Jekka group. Brother, why bother talking so much with these cowards? We'll show them how to fight in a bit. Ruan Qingli, Ruan Qingfu's younger brother, also spoke, standing on the same line as his brother. If it were us facing the Jekka group, they wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. Li Junmin, a friend of Ruan Qingfu and another Anan soldier, added, leaning on a rocket launcher with great confidence. You've never faced the sharp knife company of the Jekka group. Those people are all first-class super soldiers with sharp shooting and quick reflexes. Often, you don't even see them before you're inexplicably dead. A Siam soldier couldn't help but retort, believing these Anan soldiers were too optimistic. Hey, that's you guys. Our ancestors fought so many wars, even drove away the beautiful country. What's the Jekka group compared to that? Ruan Qingfu, who grew up listening to his forefathers' stories of resisting the beautiful country and always yearning for war, had little respect for the cowardly Siam soldiers. During the conversation, he suddenly realized something. It seems like there hasn't been any artillery shell falling for a while. Not long after he said this, an officer received an order. Quick! Go out and defend. The Jekka group is charging up. Inside the anti-artillery bunker of the trench, Siamese officers cursed as they drove the soldiers out of the bunker. As the Siamese and Anan soldiers popped their heads out of the trench, what they saw was a sight that shattered their courage. Rows of spider mechas appeared at the horizon, those towering over 10 meters tall and weighing hundreds of tons, resembled doomsday behemoths, emitting an overwhelming aura of death. Ruan Qingfu swallowed hard, his hands and feet quivering slightly. A baseless terror swept over his body and mind, instantly dispelling his earlier bold rhetoric. Every soldier in the trench was shivering with fear, and some even turned pale, only knowing to hide in the corners of the trench, clutching their rifles and muttering incomprehensible words, their minds on the verge of collapse. Aim with the single-soldier anti-tank missiles, prepare the rocket artillery, and as soon as those spider mechas enter our range, bombard them fiercely. The officer launched a drone to observe, but the drone soon spiraled out of control and crashed. However, just as the officer's order was given, the soldiers in the trench had not yet had the chance to open fire when a burst of machine gun fire suddenly swept over. We saw a Spider main battle mecha in the front open fire, its 20mm machine gun raining down like a storm, and a few soldiers who were slow to dodge had their heads burst open like rotten melons, or their arms, barely grazed by the machine gun, were instantly blown off by the tremendous force. Next to Ruan Qingfu's left hand, there was an unlucky man, his head completely blown off by the machine gun, and his headless corpse fell into his arms. From the severed neck, blood spurted out, splashing all over his head and face. Staring blankly at the headless corpse in his arms, Ruan Qingfu, witnessing battle for the first time, felt his body stiffen. His heart rate skyrocketed to 200, his expression numb, coming face to face with the harshness of war, unlike the heroic and brave tales told by his forefathers. 25 soldiers were stationed in this segment of the trench, and in just one encounter, 3 were dead and 2 were severely wounded and lost their fighting capability. The remaining soldiers, like startled quails, retracted their heads into the trench one after another, some screaming in fear, calling out the names of their fallen comrades, and a wounded soldier clutching his severed arm howled in pain, his screams continuously demoralizing his comrades. Just then, a deafening boom resounded. Another segment of their allied trench far away was engulfed in a rising fireball and smoke, a direct hit from the Spider main battle mecha's 203mm main gun. Just one shot, and almost the entire infantry platoon stationed in that trench was wiped out, with limbs and body parts even flying into Ruan Qingfu's trench, terrifying the soldiers there into madness. Quick! Quick! What are you waiting for? Aim now. The enemy's main gun fires slowly. This is our chance to strike back. Fire up those single soldier missiles. The officer started shouting to remind the soldiers to counterattack. A few approached cautiously and saw the main gun's muzzle smoke of the Spider main battle mecha gradually dissipating, its top-mounted machine guns and cannons still furiously firing, suppressing nearby trenches. Their trench, thanks to its natural camouflage from grass and good angles with boulders and trees for cover in a semi-blind spot. Seeing the Spider main battle mecha hadn't noticed them, they no longer hesitated, pulling out rocket launchers and single-soldier anti-tank missiles aiming at the Spider mecha. But just at that moment, a sharp-eyed soldier noticed something falling from the top of that Spider mecha. Bang! Bang! Simultaneously, on the A-180 Spider main battle mecha, Hao Guyu shouted, "Steel Camp brothers, it's your combat range now. I'm letting you down." Having said that, he controlled the Spider mecha to slightly crouch, and the next moment the platoon leader of Steel Camp 3rd Platoon, Chao Yangchun, dressed in biological armor, jumped down from the mecha, leaving 2 small craters on the ground. Several first-class super soldiers dressed in alloy battle armor also jumped down. "Leave it to us now, focus on suppressing enemy fire, and we'll take care of the strays." Chao Yangchun laughed, his biological armor unleashing 6 tentacle-like limbs, simultaneously curling around 6 sniper rifles. Having fused with honey-eyed worm genes, his eyes transformed into insect-like compound eyes, greatly enlarging his field of vision. Now wearing this sniper-type biological armor, as soon as he landed, he aimed his rifle at the unguarded firepower locations that the Spider main battle mecha had missed. Bang! 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 For gunshots rang out, the soldiers peeking in the trench, secretly maneuvering single-soldier anti-tank missiles and rocket launchers planning to ambush the Spider mecha, hadn't realized what was happening when bullet holes suddenly appeared in their heads. Then they fell backwards. The other super soldiers also joined the battle, holding Gatlings and heavy machine guns as heavy weapons. Normal rifle bullets bounced off their alloy battle armor. Only heavy machine guns and anti-material sniper rifles posed a threat to penetrate the alloy battle armor. But such enemies were very obvious once they fired, and with eyeworms conducting real-time surveillance overhead, any exposure would subject them to suppression and sweeping from the Spider main battle mecha and biological armor. Thus, with the Spider main battle mecha at the core of the assault, a coordinated infantry tank mission was in progress. Only, unlike traditional coordinated missions, the tanks were replaced with Spider main battle mechas, and the infantry with genetic warriors and first-class super soldiers, so accurately speaking, this was a coordinated mech infantry combat engagement. The Jekka group was using their military hardware advantage and quality of soldiers to showcase a new type of armored assault force and perfect synergy with soldiers, evolving human infantry tank tactics to perfection. Boom! The A-180 Spider Mecha, having reloaded its 203mm main cannon, roared again, obliterating a semi-concealed machine gun bunker, pulverizing the Siam soldiers inside. Hao Guyu manipulated 3 eye worms to observe the surrounding battlefield in all directions. 8 12.7mm heavy machine guns atop its body, along with 4 20mm cannons and 2 30mm cannons, continuously fired, suppressing the Siam soldiers entrenched in the trenches and bunkers from showing their heads. If it weren't for the trenches and various reinforced concrete fortifications, ordinary infantry would not survive 10 seconds in front of the Spider main battle mecha, facing only a brutal shredding by bullets. While firing, the Spider main battle mecha advanced, its 8 metallic long legs granting it formidable and agile cross-country speed. Even in semi-hilly terrains, it could race at speeds of 70 to 80 kilometers per hour, effortlessly crossing various anti-tank ditches. But most of the time, the Spider main battle mecha did not maintain such high speeds. Its movement was aimed at eliminating the enemy's main forces, not racing. This defense line really has a lot of enemy troops. As Hao Guyu piloted the Spider mecha, he reminded, "Brothers, I'm heading to that section of the trench in front. Watch the surroundings for me." Having said that, under Hao Guyu's control, the Spider main battle mecha stepped into a trench and began clearing the enemy layer by layer. The soldiers inside the trench looked terrified, many abandoning their weapons and turning to run. But the result was predictable. Slaughtered by bullets from the Spider mecha's heavy machine guns while attempting to flee. At that moment, more than 30 meters to the left of the Spider main battle mecha, some activity stirred at the side of a gun pit in the trench. Several Siam soldiers were cautiously crawling out of the gun pit to launch a sneak attack. The leading soldier, carrying a rocket launcher, was about to aim at the Spider mecha, which was nearby. But as soon as he showed himself, he was spotted by a super soldier accompanying the Spider mecha in combat. The next moment, a first-class super soldier swiveled his Gatling gun. A burst of bullets flew out, shattering the upper half of the Siam soldier's body. The only thing that fell back into the gun pit was a bloody and mutilated torso, horrifying the few Siam soldiers who were about to emerge, turning their faces pale. The super soldier, with a cold look in his eyes, kept up the rain of bullets with his left hand, while his right hand pulled out a thermal bomb hand grenade, hurling it with pinpoint accuracy over 60 meters away into the underground gun pit, a feat ordinary infantry couldn't achieve. The pupils of the Siam soldiers inside the tunnel contracted sharply. Some were stunned with fear. Only one soldier snapped out of it after 2 seconds, trying to pick up the thermal bomb hand grenade to throw it back. But by then it was already too late. Bang! The thermal bomb grenade exploded, containing a cloud explosive. Once a small amount of explosive was ignited, the cloud explosive was blasted out and mixed with the air to produce a secondary explosion, with a lethal radius reaching up to 7 meters. Its explosive effect equated to 10 regular hand grenades, especially potent in confined spaces. When the thermal bomb exploded, nothing else mattered afterward. Only 2 severely wounded soldiers managed to crawl out of the gun pit, only to be shot dead by a super soldier lying in wait outside. Ground rats. One comes, one dies. With a slight spit, the super soldier's gaze sharpened as he sought out those sneaking enemies on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Chao Yongchun, clad in biological armor, had just sniped a few enemies when he suddenly twitched at the corner of his eye, hearing the thunderous roar of a high-powered engine. A main battle tank, camouflaged with branches and underbrush and hidden among the bushes, started its slow movement, emerging from its cover as its 120mm smoothbore cannon rotated, causing Chao Yongchun's expression to change. His biological armor could withstand the sweep of heavy machine gun fire, but direct hits from a tank's main cannon would obliterate him into pieces. "Brother Chao, I'm coming." Just as the tank began to aim, Hao Guyu's voice sounded in the earpiece. Immediately after, the 230mm cannons of the Spider main battle mecha suddenly opened fire, shooting a stream of armor-piercing incendiary bullets that formed a flaming chain in the air, pouring in at a steep angle from the top of the tank and cracking open its skull. Once the bullets penetrated the tank, they bounced around inside like rubber balls, killing all the crew members. Then the incendiary compounds within the armor-piercing incendiary bullets ignited, piercing through the tank's ammunition and setting off the explosives. With a loud bang, the freshly appeared tank was destroyed within seconds, its turret blown off the body by the blast wave and rolling on the ground, eventually crushing the legs of an Annan soldier nearby, smashing his leg bones and eliciting a painful scream. "Thanks." Chow Yong-chun breathed a sigh of relief. It was a close call indeed. "Together we can wipe out these little monkeys." Hao Guyu spoke with a laugh, controlling the spider main battle mecha to join the fight with even more aggression. "All right, together." Chow Yong-chun also laughed loudly, his 6 sniper rifles firing back and forth, clearing out potential threats for the spider main battle mecha. Facing the fierce offensive of the spider mecha, the Siam soldiers could only hunker down behind their fortifications and trenches, or sneak around like ground rats, carrying rocket launchers and single-soldier anti-tank missiles in attempts to ambush the spider main battle mecha. This plan was fundamentally sound. Although the spider main battle mecha had firepower points all over its body, its field of view didn't have the huge blind spots typical of tanks. But after all, there was only one mecha, which needed to control a combat radius of several hundred meters, and there were always blind spots in the coverage of its firepower. Especially once close to the spider main battle mecha, as most of the weapons of the spider main battle mecha were mounted at a position 10 meters high, the Siamese soldiers could sneak in through underground tunnels or hide in bunkers with anti-bomb shelters, waiting for the spider mecha to pass by. Then they would secretly drill underneath to launch a sneak attack. It was difficult to adjust the firepower in a short time, and these were the opportunities for the Siamese army. Some of the Annan soldiers even made the most of their ancestral skills, hiding in the bushes and treetops of the hills, using the tactics that had worked against the beautiful country soldiers, concealing themselves until the spider mecha approached for a fierce ambush. Once, with this trick, they instilled a severe case of dendrophobia in the beautiful country soldiers, to the point where every tree seemed as if it could speak, wearing out the beautiful country soldiers. However, the genetic warriors and first-class super soldiers accompanying the spider mecha greatly compensated for this vulnerability. The Siamese soldiers who emerged from the tunnels and bomb shelters with rocket launchers, only to show up near the spider main battle mecha, ran smack into the heavy infantry advancing with it. Even the Annan soldiers ambushed in the bushes and treetops could not escape the discerning eyes of the super soldiers. After all, jungle warfare was the domain of the super soldiers. Playing this game with them was simply wishful thinking on the part of these Annan soldiers. Bullets tore through the bodies of the ambushing soldiers. Those in the trees were mowed down, with gunfire pouring down like rain on bananas, piercing through those hidden in the foliage. A rain of corpses began to fall in the area. Their bullets sparking off biological armor and alloy battle armor were barely effective. The combat power between the two sides was completely disproportionate. Genetic warriors and super soldiers feared armored vehicles and heavy weapons, but these big targets were either blown to smithereens by the 203mm main cannon or shredded by various machine guns in the presence of the spider main battle mecha. The eye worm flying thousands of meters in the sky had excellent vision. There might still be soldiers missed, hiding in crevices, caves, or under camouflaged suits among bushes, but armored vehicles and heavy weapons emplacements almost couldn't hope to hide. Once they activated, they were instantly located and destroyed with ease by the spider mecha. The synergy of forces made this new tactic of infantry and mecha cooperative combat extremely effective, allowing for rapid advancement. In this process, it wasn't that the spider mecha wasn't hit by anti-armor weaponry. It's just that the spider's defense was so robust, these anti-armor strikes didn't amount to much. Unless it was hit by multiple successive shots which could indeed paralyze or destroy a spider mecha, how many infantrymen could actually achieve that? With heavy infantry in biological armor and alloy battle armor covering for any lapses, it was difficult for those ambushing soldiers to even land a single rocket or anti-tank missile. Hence the spider mecha maintained a formidable combat effectiveness. The spider mecha kept advancing and soon came upon another trench. In this trench, Ruan Qingfu's face was filled with disbelief. He watched the mecha approach like a monster on land, drawing ever closer to his position. The distance was now less than 100 meters. A tremendous sense of fear swept over him as he clenched the rifle in his hands tightly, though it couldn't offer him any semblance of security. This is too much. Take this, a rocket. His friend Lee Junmin, screaming with rage, shouldered a rocket launcher, poked his body out of the trench, about to pull the trigger at the spider mecha. Before he could finish his roar, his head was blown apart by a sniper rifle. Thud! Lee Junmin's body rocked and fell into the muddy trench, the rocket launcher rolling to the side, his eyes wide open in death. His body twitched a few times and then lay still. No, 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 Junmin, you wake up, wake up! Witnessing this scene, Ruan Qingfu, with trembling hands, shook Lee Junmin's body as if he could actually wake him up. The heavy footsteps of the spider mecha were almost upon him. The trench was shaking, and the shadow was already encroaching. Ah! I'm gonna fight you to the death. Ruan Qingli, Ruan Qingfu's brother, with a face full of rage, charged out of the trench with a modified anti-tank mine. This anti-tank mine had its pressure fuse removed and was fitted with a hand grenade fuse instead. Facing certain death, he attempted to rush beneath the spider main battle mecha, becoming a human mobile bomb, hoping to at least sever a metallic leg of the spider main battle mecha with this mine packed with 7 or 8 kilograms of explosive. However, good intentions met a cruel reality. Rushing out of the trench, he was greeted with a barrage of gunfire. A super soldier wielding a 14.5 mm anti-aircraft machine gun simply shattered his body. The anti-tank mine also fell to the ground, blowing up after a few seconds' delay and blasting a large crater in the ground, obliterating Ruan Qingli's remains as well. Ruan Qingfu, dazed, looked up at the looming shadow of the spider mecha and where his brother once stood, his mind going blank. The few remaining soldiers nearby broke down and fled heedlessly, only to be gunned down. Meanwhile, above Ruan Qingfu, a colossal metallic leg was raised and then brought down heavily, crushing any consciousness he might have had in the next moment. Bang! The spider mecha stomped down, crushing Ruan Qingfu to death. Everything above his chest was turned into mincemeat, leaving a pit filled with a mixture of flesh and bone shards. How Guyu didn't care what he had stepped on. He coordinated with the genetic warriors and super soldiers to continue advancing, clearing trench after trench. The soldiers lying in ambush within the trench tunnels would be dealt with by genetic warriors leaping into the trenches, while the exposed fire points were destroyed one by the spider mecha. Their cooperation was seamless. The fortifications, bristling with various machine gun bunkers, which a battalion of infantry would struggle to capture in half a day, were breached as easily as tearing through paper with the deployment of just one spider mecha and a few heavily armed soldiers. Although the depth of the Karamu defense line was vast, the efficiency of the coordinated mechanized infantry assault was still extremely fast, capturing trench after trench. We've advanced 3 kilometers. The eyeworm's recon shows no enemy fire points ahead. I'll take you all to the next enemy sector. Can you still hold up? How Guyu had just cleared an area of Siam soldiers' covert combat fortifications, killing most of them with the 203mm main cannon, followed by the super soldiers finishing off the badly injured Siam soldiers. At this point, his position was somewhat deep, and he had begun to separate from the main armored forces behind him. No problem, we still have the strength, replied Xiao Yangchun, shrugging his shoulders and signaling a few super soldiers to come over. Together, they climbed back on top of the spider mecha, sitting on its top. The spider mecha then sped up, conserving their strength as it carried them to the next enemy defense line. The super soldiers on the mecha's back rested while retrieving ammunition provided by the meat tumor from the open hatch, replenishing their own weapons. The spider mecha, with its hundreds of tons of combat weight, had plenty of capacity to supply several infantrymen's ammunition needs. However, while they were en route, suddenly a screaming sound came from the sky. A shell landed, blasting a deep crater 40 meters away from the spider mecha, and shards of flying rocks battered against the spider mecha's body. Artillery! Spread out and take cover. Use the mech as shelter. Shouts rose from atop the A-180 spider mecha, and Xiao Yangchun and the others, well-trained, flipped down from atop the mecha and used the body of the spider main battle mecha as cover. They grabbed onto the handrails and indentations on the upper part of the Spider main battle mecha, moving to the area where the mecha's belly and long legs joined. The belly of the Spider mecha was slightly indented inward, equipped with grab hooks and safety straps, allowing the men to hide within the insides of the long legs and under the belly of the Spider main battle mecha. The Spider mecha's metal legs were exceptionally sturdy, and with the inward curve of the belly, they provided more than enough cover for a person. It seems Siam can't hold back their artillery anymore, realized Hao Guyu. The Siamese army, evidently unable to handle the rapid advance of the mechanical army, had deployed their hidden artillery to counterattack. As soon as Hao Guyu had this thought, he controlled the Spider main battle mecha to quickly move from the spot. Not long after they had moved, several fireballs exploded around their previous position. From the firepower of the enemy's artillery, it was clear that they were shelling with 155mm howitzers. Yet relying on howitzers to destroy Spider mecha was unrealistic. Trajectory shells had a large deviation, threatening the Spider mecha only if they luckily hit its main body. Clearly, the goal was to obliterate the genetic warriors and super soldiers. Fortunately, the robust bodies and meat tumors of these mechas were sufficiently effective at absorbing shrapnel and shockwaves. That was close. Bits of shrapnel smacked against the long metal legs of the Spider mecha where Chao Yongchun hung, creating shallow dents and sending a chill down his spine. But this was only the beginning as suddenly, the sky lit up with red trails. These were dozens of 122mm rockets carpet bombing the area, a relentless pursuit by the Siamese artillery born either from determination or deep resentment to kill the genetic warriors. Logically, such carpet bombing with rockets, given their lack of precision, would rarely hit a moving Spider mecha, but coincidences do happen, and this time it did. A rocket landed squarely on the Spider mecha's main body, the high-intensity warhead bursting open at the top, ripping apart and warping the armor, scattering the internal meat tumors. One of the Spider mecha's long legs broke, causing its massive frame to sway. It was severely damaged by the blast. Below the Spider mecha, Chao Yongchun and his companions felt a surge of nausea and disorientation. Thanks to the Spider mecha's strong defense, its outer armor and meat tumors effectively countered the shrapnel and shock waves. Therefore, even with a direct hit on top, Chao Yongchun and the others, sheltered beneath its belly, survived due to the absorbed kinetic energy. What crappy luck! Hang tight, I'm going to move, Hao Guyu yelled out, accelerating the Spider mecha's movement to dodge the Siamese artillery's covering fire. The Spider main battle mecha ran at full speed, with Chao Yongchun and others clinging underneath between its long legs like koala joeys clutching their mother, gently swaying with the mecha's run. They could only hold tightly to the hanging supports and wrap the safety straps tightly around their waists to secure themselves. Once they ran out of the bombing area, the Spider mecha was charred black with smoke, its body riddled with a dense pattern of shallow pits from the artillery shrapnel, and two metal legs were broken. Its top had cracked open, exposing the slowly writhing meat tumors inside, which were gradually starting to regenerate. Bastard, it's my turn now. Hao Guyu saw the position of the enemy artillery plotted on the biological radar. With its unique capabilities and aided by the eyeworms in the sky, it could also partly function as counter-battery radar. The 203mm main cannon raised high, guided by the ballistic trajectory calculated by the biological radar. Hao Guyu fired without hesitation. A 125 kilograms shell flew out of the cannon at 980 meters per second, speeding over dozens of kilometers, eventually exploding in a hollow 27 kilometers away. When the shell hit the ground, it burst with extraordinary power, typical of a 203mm shell. The targeted artillery position housed a battalion-sized force with 15 towed field guns and two 40-barrel rocket launchers. When the Spider mecha's high explosive bomb went off, it directly destroyed one of the rocket launchers. The blast wave flung the artillerymen into the air, blasting a large crater nearly 7 to 8 meters deep in their place, littering the vicinity with limbs and body parts. Boom! Boom! Hao Guyu's main gun fired twice in quick succession before he rapidly made his escape. Because enemy shells were also coming over, although howitzers firing in a high arc found it difficult to hit moving targets, They were extremely accurate against stationary ones, a purpose they were specially designed for, thus it was unwise to remain in the same spot. In such an artillery duel, although Hao Guyu's firepower was formidable, he only had one gun, while the enemy comprised an entire artillery battalion. The sheer number of enemy cannons made up for their lack in firepower. However, Hao Guyu wasn't the least bit worried, for the roaring sounds of fighter jets soon filled the sky above. 2 Jekka Group fighter jets appeared in the sky dome, summoned by Hao Guyu. "What era are we in that you're still playing the game of artillery duel with me?" A cold smile formed on the corner of Hao Guyu's mouth. He was not one to fight for sheer bravado when he could shake up the enemy without hesitation. Now that his side maintained air superiority and controlled the skies over the battlefield, targeting these ground artillery units that struggled with mobility, the Air Force was the optimal solution. Warhawk 1, this is a 180 mecha. Enemy coordinates, 126-4550, 24338250. Target nature is artillery position, reference marker. Hao Guyu rapidly reported the position, providing guidance information to the fighters above. Warhawk received. Bombing coordinates have been entered. Commencing bombing runs. The pilot's voice came through the radio, as the 2 Jekka Group fighter jets, from an altitude of 5,000 meters, released 8 500-kilogram class precision-guided aerial bombs in rapid succession. The 560-kilogram aviation bombs were fearsome in power, measuring 3.05 meters in length, with a diameter of 0.35 meters and wingspan of 0.75 meters, packed with 235 kilograms of TNT in their warhead. Lacking the ability to fly, the guided bombs flipped over after release, unfolding their wings fitted on the bomb's exterior, and glided toward the Siam artillery's position under the influence of gravity and aileron controls, detonating almost instantly upon arrival. Boom! Waves of intense heat surged from the artillery positions, followed by an earth-shattering explosion. Thick, rolling smoke rose like a sandstorm blanketing the sky, with crimson flames bursting forth in a stunning display. The artillerymen, manning the cannons, were catapulted through the air as if they had hit an invisible wall, flung violently by the shockwaves. The 500-kilogram class bomb shrapnel could inflict casualties up to 250 meters away, and the artillerymen within several dozen meters of the blast's epicenter were obliterated without a trace. The heavy howitzers and rocket artillery twisted and warped, with some blown into pieces, and others flipped over by the shockwave's force. The ferocious explosions resonated 8 times in succession, with artillery emplacements collapsing one after another. Broken rebar and concrete plummeted like meteor showers, mercilessly striking down the fleeing artillerymen. Fire and smoke tore through the sky dome, the power of these 500-kilogram class precision-guided aerial bombs far surpassing that of the 203mm shells. After 8 bombs dropped, the artillery battalion was effectively annihilated, with no functional cannons remaining, and the soldiers suffered massive casualties. Those who miraculously survived bore varying degrees of injuries. Only a handful of lucky ones emerged unscathed but were nearly driven to the brink of collapse by the airstrike. Following the air attack, 8 enormous, conspicuous craters marked the location, with artillery parts and human remains scattered among the scorched earth, bearing a cruel testament to the war. Target confirmed destroyed. Continuing patrol in the area, wishing you safe travels. The pilot's voice communicated over the radio after completing their mission, as the 2 fighter jets made a low pass above the Spider Mecha A-180, rocking their wings in greeting to Hao Guyu. "Thanks, brothers. I'll buy you a drink when you get back." Hao Guyu raised 2 metallic legs to wave at his own fighter jets, watching as they disappeared into the clouds and out of sight. "Having fighter jets escort you sure feels amazing," Hao Guyu muttered to himself, now realizing the benefits of calling in the Air Force for a bombardment without hesitation. Truly comfortable and easy, an approach beautiful country loved to utilize. Meanwhile, Chow Yong-chun and the others, who had just climbed back atop the mecha, also took off their helmets and gasped for air. The recent barrage had put them in a tight spot. Indeed, combat in open plains and hillsides was not their forte. If not for the protection of the Spider Mecha, they would have been killed or injured by the shelling. "Are you all right, everyone?" Hao Guyu asked with concern. We're fine, just a bit rattled by the blast waves. But we'll recover shortly. You keep moving. We'll join up with the main force. Chao Yongchun waved his hand, signaling that there were no issues. Then hold on tight. Hao Guyu nodded and drove the spider mecha away, heading towards the rendezvous with the main force. Similar to the battle experienced by Hao Guyu, the entire Karamu defense line was engaged in combat. Over 300 large mechas formed a sharp spearhead, continuously piercing through the defense lines Siam prided themselves on. In response, Siam mobilized hidden artillery in an attempt to stop the Jekka Group's mechanical army's advance, but to no avail. The spider mechas themselves possessed considerable retaliatory capability. 203mm caliber main cannons were not just for show, with their tens of kilometers of strike range and shocking power. Ordinary 155mm howitzers were no match for them. Moreover, the spider mechas were highly agile and did not fear such shelling. And to top it off, the Jekka Group now held air superiority, with their fighter jets soaring through the skies. The artillery positions that were exposed faced the threat of airstrikes from fighter jets. While some self-propelled guns managed to escape and hide, many exposed artillery pieces became the victims of airstrikes. The entire Siam Karamu defense line was equipped with several sets of air defense missile systems, but compared to fighter jets, even though they occasionally managed to shoot down a fighter, the loss to the missile systems themselves was much more substantial. Many of the Jekka Group's aircraft that took to the skies carried anti-radar missiles, destroying the ground radars and air defense missile systems of the Siam side. Without the eyes of the radar, air defense effectively became non-existent. After the mechanical army had cleared most of the defense lines, the ground forces of Jekka Group followed up, continuing to eradicate those remaining enemies and taking over the captured positions. Because the Jekka Group's mecha forces broke through the lines so swiftly, the following ground troops couldn't keep up. They couldn't even see the mecha's exhaust and were only involved in some minor engagements. More often than not, by the time they arrived at the battlefield, all that was left for them to do was to take prisoners. At 3:10 in the afternoon, Hao Guyu's A-180 arrived at the assembly point of the large mecha forces. When Hao Guyu returned here to join forces, he saw the mechanical army attacking a solid Anan army position. Whiz! 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 A fly rocket mecha settled on the ground, its top-mounted 48-tube multiple rocket launcher nest firing away, its buzzing sounds vibrating the air as it launched 220mm rockets. They blazed through the sky like the angry thunder of Raytheon, turning rage into a destructive force that bombarded a hill in front of them. After completing its barrage, the fly rocket mecha retracted its rocket launcher nest in less than 10 seconds, released its 8-legged chassis, and ran away quickly from the site to avoid the enemy's counter-artillery fire. Even as it moved, the fly rocket mecha was continuously loading new rockets. The rockets inside the mecha were squeezed out by the meat tumors writhing, loaded into the launcher nest, averaging a new rocket every 10 seconds. Just 8 minutes later, the rocket artillery that had been reloaded completed its battle deployment and once again began its attack mission. The hill that was struck by the fly rocket mecha appeared as if red meteors swept across the sky and plummeted down. Accompanied by the explosions of their warheads, the powerful impact force and blazing temperature swept in all directions, mercilessly striking everything around it, including human bodies and fortifications. The nearby buildings and vegetation were destroyed, and clouds of smoke and dust billowed up. Under the barrage, many of the Nnan soldiers hidden in the trenches were shattered, their body parts thrown hundreds of meters away. Each of these 220mm rockets weighed a hefty 280 kilograms and had an extensive lethal range. Firing 48 rockets at once made the scene from a distance look as if the entire hill was engulfed in flames and smoke. What incredible power! Hao Guyu secretly clicked his tongue. His spider mecha had just taken a hit from a 122mm rocket and suffered significant damage. If hit directly by one of these 220mm rockets, the hundreds of kilograms weight of the warhead would crash through, combined with the explosive mix of black powder and TNT, even the defense of a spider mecha would collapse and be paralyzed. Though the smoke of battle had not yet cleared, atop the hills, a Scorpion Flame Sprayer mecha and 2 Spider main battle mechas took position on this hill. 2 armed helicopters dominated the sky above, accompanied by 20 or 30 super soldiers and genetic warriors engaging in combat. Although rocket artillery was powerful, the shelters built in the core area of Karamu were very sturdy. After the surface fortifications were swept away, underground concrete structures still concealed many soldiers. The Yan'an soldiers stationed in the hills were even more tenacious, launching a counterattack as soon as the mechanical army ascended the hill. But the tail of the Scorpion Flame Sprayer mecha shot up high, like a scorpion lashing its tail, and aimed at a trench ahead. From the nozzle at the end of its tail, a surging dragon of flame shot out with a range of 500 meters, rolling into the trench and igniting the Yan'an soldiers who dared to peek out and return fire. The flames devoured the entire trench, turning it into a fiery gulch. The horrific destruction turned the faces of the witnessing Yan'an soldiers pale with terror in their eyes. Ordinary flamethrower soldiers with flamethrowers had a range of only a few dozen meters, and flame tanks had a range of only 200 meters, whereas the Scorpion main battle mecha's flames reached beyond 500 meters and had a wider spray and greater coverage area, vastly more powerful. Tisk TSK. Now that's a satisfying blaze. I kinda want to pilot one of those mechas. Seems like quite the thrill. How Guyu couldn't help but click his tongue in awe as he watched the scene through an eye worm. Chow Yongchun glanced at him and asked, "Thinking of changing your ride?" "Nah. I still prefer my 180. How Guyu shook his head decisively, indicating his lasting love for the Spider mecha. In the midst of casual conversation, the infantry-mech coordinated forces kept advancing, and in one underground fortress, Yan'an soldiers were bunkered in, stubbornly resisting. They resisted the main cannon bombardments of the Spider mechas with their solid underground structures and the circuitous tunnels. "This won't do, there's a lot of heavy firepower inside. A head-on assault would result in casualties." Leading a team of genetic warriors in an attempted frontal assault, he promptly retreated upon encountering the pervasive firepower inside and called for the Scorpion Flame Sprayer mecha. The Flame Sprayer mecha did not disappoint, directing its scorpion tail at the deep entrance, where billowing flames poured forth like a raging torrent. The fire gushed deep underground, burning everything in its path. Above the hills, the ventilation and other hidden passages of the underground bunker emitted streaks of flame simultaneously, indicating just how large a fire the Scorpion Flame Sprayer mecha had set. Screams of agony and the smell of scorched flesh wafted up from below as Yan'an soldiers engulfed in flames fled through other passages, screaming chaotically as they scattered about. The Jekka group's mechas and soldiers did not shoot them down to give them a swift end. Instead, they quietly watched as the Yan'an soldiers were consumed by the fire, their skin and flesh charred black, enduring excruciating pain in their final moments, burning for several minutes before collapsing into curled and charred corpses. The hill's defense line was not an impediment for the Jekka group. The Scorpion Flame Sprayer mecha, like a walking inferno, set enemy lines ablaze wherever it went. The Yan'an soldiers were utterly terrified, running at the mere wind of the flame-wielding behemoth, more fearful than even the sight of the Spider main battle mecha. After all, being burned to death is one of the cruelest tortures known to humanity. As the Scorpion Flame Sprayer mecha wreaked havoc, 3 armed helicopters from the Siam military began to take off from the hillside tunnel-style hangars, one of which was an Apache armed helicopter purchased from the beautiful country. Daring to deploy armed helicopters under the circumstance where the Jekka group held air superiority, they were indeed left with no other choice. Hiding in the bunkers might have shielded them from aerial assault and artillery bombardment, but now that the mechanical army was about to take the hills, if they did not come out now, there would no longer be a chance. Down below the hills, a B air defense mecha caught sight of this scene. The mecha pilot, who was bored and idling away, instantly saw a glimmer of excitement. This air defense mecha was also modified from the chassis of the Spider main battle mecha. The huge 203mm main cannon had been removed, and on top of the mecha's body were several towering twin-linked high-altitude artillery pieces. The mecha was equipped with 4 twin-linked 35mm anti-aircraft guns, totaling 8, as well as a short-range air defense missile system fitted with a 3x4B Sting air defense missile launch module. The missiles used a vertical cold launch system and were radio command guided. After their launch into the air, they had a decent hit rate against low-flying, slow-moving targets and were capable of intercepting low-flying attack planes and armed helicopters. Seeing the Siam military dispatching their armed helicopters, the B air defense mecha immediately sprang into action, boldly moving towards them, unafraid to take on the 3 armed helicopters alone. In modern warfare, a single anti-aircraft gun, except under very special circumstances such as ambushing a hovering armed helicopter, would hardly achieve a kill in anti-aircraft firing. Only by coordinating anti-aircraft gun forces in company and battalion units and relying on a larger barrage can they effectively form air defense. However, the B air defense mecha, with its fierce firepower and the massive ammunition capacity brought by its exaggerated size, had 8 35mm anti-aircraft guns and 12 short-range air defense missiles, one unit of which could match the firepower of an entire anti-aircraft gun company. After closing in, the missile nests of the B air defense mecha opened up, and 3 air defense missiles were launched and ignited, rapidly soaring into the sky toward the armed helicopters. Warning! Missile incoming! Missile incoming! Alarms went off in the 3 armed helicopters. The pilots were scared out of their wits as they executed emergency maneuvers, continuously ejecting flares. Still, one of the armed helicopters was hit by a missile and disintegrated in midair. While the armed helicopters were executing their emergency maneuvers, the twin 35mm anti-aircraft gun mounts on the B air defense mecha moved, targeting the remaining 2. The next moment, a deafening sound erupted as the 8 35mm anti-aircraft machine guns fired furiously. Like a curtain of rain, the shells covered the target airspace in a barrage, blocking the armed helicopter's space to dodge. This twin-linked 35mm anti-aircraft cannon could reach a maximum firing rate of 550 rounds per minute, with an effective range of 4,000 meters and an effective altitude of 3,000 meters. With 4 of these gun mounts, the B air defense mecha could fire over 2,000 rounds a minute at maximum rate. It's worth mentioning that this anti-aircraft cannon technology was acquired from a neutral country in the European Union. Under the impetus of additional funds from the JECA Group, those sternly refusing gentlemen ultimately could not resist the charm offensive, and did not only provide the full set of technology for this anti-aircraft cannon to the JECA Group but also sold the production line to them. When these anti-aircraft cannons fired at full force, the scene resembled rain pouring down. Shell casings cascaded like waterfalls from above the mecha, as a hailstorm of bullets covered the sky dome. The B air defense mecha didn't rely on simple ranging for manual shooting. The aiming systems of its 4 high guns were linked to the biological radar, forming a semi-automatic integration of shells and cannons. Under the guidance of the genetic warrior pilot, they could continuously intercept target information, calculate the position relationship between the high-altitude artillery and the target, and adjust the firing data according to the corresponding deployment positions. Despite evasive maneuvers, the 2 helicopters in the sky could not escape the punishment of the B air defense mecha. One was blasted into scrap on the spot, and the last Apache armed helicopter aimed at the B air defense mecha, firing a barrage of 70mm rockets to saturate the area and also fired an anti-tank missile. Yet these efforts were in vain as the B air defense mecha swiftly moved aside, avoiding the dense area of the rocket barrage, while its high guns blew up the slow-moving anti-tank missile with a barrage of their own. Seeing this, the Apache armed helicopter turned around and fled, no longer lingering. But the B air defense mecha pursued relentlessly, launching 2 more air defense missiles. As the Apache armed helicopter attempted evasive maneuvers, the B air defense mecha below had already opened fire again. If the enemy didn't dodge, they'd be hit by the air defense missiles, and if they did dodge, they'd be struck by the anti-aircraft guns. Ultimately, a series of 35mm caliber shells covered the airspace near the Apache armed helicopter. Boom! 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 Several anti-aircraft shells penetrated the underside of the Apache armed helicopter. While 25mm shells might not guarantee to bring down the tough-skinned Apache, the 35mm anti-aircraft shells had strong penetrating power and became known as the Apache's Delight. The shells easily pierced the helicopter's under armor, ripping apart various components and instruments within, causing leaks in the fuel tank, damaging the engine and severing the tail. No matter how the two pilots tried to control it, the Apache armed helicopter was unable to pull up and spun, tumbling down on the hills and exploding into a massive fireball. The B air defense mecha, designed to guard positions and armored units, showcased its impressive aerial interception capabilities in real combat, becoming a true low-altitude aircraft hunter. As if not yet satisfied, this B air defense mecha abandoned its primary role and targeted the Annan troops fleeing the collapsing hills, leveling its high-altitude artillery and relentlessly firing shells, usurping the task of fire suppression usually handled by the Spider main battle mecha. The Annan soldiers were immediately in trouble. Those who strayed from solid cover were viciously bombarded by the 35mm high-altitude artillery, physically scattering them across the area, with human body parts splattering everywhere. This air defense mecha was not only exceptional against air targets, but when aimed at ground infantry it was particularly ruthless. These combat mechas are too terrifying. Regular troops can't contend with them. Song Ziming, a military observer, ignoring the risks, also personally went to the frontline combat area, holding a telescope, to witness the battle for the hills unfold. This stronghold, heavily fortified with engineering works transforming the hills into a militarized war fortress, was quickly flattened under the relentless attack of the Jekka Group's mechas. Especially the combat capabilities of the B air defense mecha, the Scorpion flame sprayer mecha, and the Fly rocket launcher mecha greatly impressed him. The benefits brought by the Spider mecha chassis transformations are too significant. Not just the combat mechas, but those auxiliary mechas are also very formidable. Look over there? Vargas pointed towards another side, where a large mecha, running at high speed, appeared in their field of view. This was a flying locust transport mecha, modified from a Spider mecha chassis. This mecha had most of its firepower configurations removed, replaced instead by a massive internal cargo space and three-dimensional compartments, capable of a certain degree of shape transformation, emanating a rough and dominant aura. This flying locust transport mecha had a staggering carrying capacity, its internal space divided into two layers, with a huge crane installed on the top, not only for loading and unloading cargo but also for lifting damaged vehicles, essentially serving as a mobile base. When transporting combat personnel, it could once carry an entire fully armed infantry company and heavy equipment, easily loading 2 main battle tanks. It could also transport self-propelled howitzers, tracked infantry fighting vehicles, and rocket artillery together in several loads. Even if other Spider main battle mechas were incapacitated on the battlefield, it could lift one and carry it back. After rushing up the hill, the flying locust transport mecha crouched down, its long spider legs folding into a ramp, steel plates opening up. Droves of fully armed soldiers streamed down, accompanied by armored vehicles and even tanks, allowing them to join the mechanical army in battle. Otherwise, ordinary soldiers and armored units would hardly be able to keep up with the full-speed movement of the main battle mechas. Among them were numerous first-class super soldiers. The flying locust transport mecha more often ensured the logistical safety of the mechanical army, transporting combat personnel like genetic warriors wearing biological armor and first-class super soldiers, as well as ample amounts of ammunition and diesel, guaranteeing sustained combat operations for the mechanical army. In a short while, as the mechanical army advanced, the Annan army atop the hills was decimated, and the mechanical army moved onward. At a turbulent river ahead, the Siamese army had destroyed the bridge in an attempt to block the Jekka Group's advance. But all these efforts were in vain, as a large ant-style engineering mecha plunged into the river, stabilizing itself on the riverbed with its 8 metal legs, then deploying its floating side panels to use itself as a base for constructing a pontoon bridge across the river, allowing the ground forces to rapidly follow through. This was the ant-style engineering mecha, tasked with field engineering support, its body devoid of any weapon systems but filled with various construction cranes and equipment, possessing comprehensive construction capabilities. Faced with roads and bridges destroyed by the Siamese army, the ant-style engineering mecha could excavate and build roads on the spot, erect steel or pontoon bridges, and quickly construct field fortifications using mechanized equipment, while also removing enemy mines and repairing damaged mechas. It can be said that the ant-style engineering mecha knew many tricks of the trade, capable of building roads, constructing bridges, digging fortifications, repairing mechas, and detonating mines, truly exemplifying a multi-use machine. Following the observation all the way, Song Ziming was dazzled and exclaimed regretfully, "Such a mecha chassis, capable of flexibly driving hundreds of tons of spider mechas and transforming the abundant space, is extremely valuable. If only we also had such a mecha chassis, we could also create a variety of war machines." Unfortunately, although Hua country is also increasing its research in the mecha field, it is uncertain when a breakthrough will occur, so they could only stare greedily at the Jekka Group's mechanical army. Mecha truly are a major force in the future military revolution, but unfortunately, Jekka Group isn't willing to sell or provide technical support. I'll report back and suggest that our two countries collaborate in mecha research and development to catch up with this military evolution as soon as possible. Vargas, upon seeing the various types of mechanical armies, felt deep envy. This mechanical army was much more powerful than the past Iron Streams. If Jekka Group were to sell the full set of mecha technologies, even if it cost a few $100 billion, Russia would willingly pay. But Jekka Group was too wealthy, and such core technology was definitely not for sale. I will report this. Song Ziming nodded, looking at the mechanical army that was dominating the battlefield, feeling great envy just like Vargas. On the Karamu defense line, the Jekka Group, based on the Spider mecha chassis, continuously pushed forward with newly modified armored monsters, greatly enhancing the combat efficiency of the mechanical army. The entire Karamu defense line was very wide and deep. Under normal circumstances, advancing the army would require slow grinding like hammering nails, gradually knocking down protruding parts of the defense line, inevitably falling into a war of attrition. However, Jekka Group, relying on its mechanical army and air superiority, played a World War II style of lightning warfare on the Karamu defense line. The mechanical army made deep penetrations, routing the Karamu Siamese army completely, like a sharp dagger thrust directly into the heart of the defense line. As the mechanical army made its assault, Jekka Group's fighters also engaged in battle, seizing air superiority and coordinating bombings that effectively supported the mechanical army's advance, speeding up the process even more. Just in the first day, Jekka Group's mechanical army advanced to the core area of the Karamu defense line, launching a massive pincer movement. Subsequently, the mechanical army began maneuvering on both flanks, surrounding large numbers of Siamese troops who couldn't retreat in time. The surrounded troops had no logistics, no reinforcements, and even their food supply was problematic. Jekka Group's main ground forces that followed could easily devour those surrounded enemies bit by bit. Armies known only for holding positions, when facing the sharp and swift mechanical army, were like cutting through butter with a knife swiftly breached by Jekka Group. Then, with the support of other ground forces, they constantly performed enveloping movements to annihilate the enemy. Relying on the lightning-fast advance and powerful combat strength, the Siamese army lost morale under this sudden threat. Once surrounded and cut off, the entire army quickly collapsed, and masses of soldiers were thus annihilated or captured by Jekka Group. The Siamese Four Countries Army deployed on the Karamu defense line had 350,000 soldiers, with a defense depth of over 380 kilometers. Originally, either Siam or Beautiful Country planned for Jekka Group to keep dividing their forces deeper into the line, inevitably stretching their supply lines too long and dispersing their forces. Utilizing the huge strategic depth, they aimed to absorb the peak of Jekka Group's offensive. But Jekka Group's mechanical army exceeded conventional forces. Facing the mechanical army's advance and encirclement, the speed and power of this breakthrough exceeded their defensive limits, and the offensive momentum was unstoppable. All their plans turned into illusions. Instead, their troops were divided and surrounded, leading to the constant fall of the Karamu defense line. On January 25th, Jekka Group's 1st Mecha Combat Brigade broke through the Huishan defense line, capturing the highest point of the Karamu defense line. That same day, they moved into Luoyang City, seizing the strategic and industrial city. On January 26th, Jekka Group's 2nd Mechanical Combat Brigade split up to surround and defend against the Siamese 2nd Army Group in the Bai Guang Plain area. This 2nd Army Group consisted not only of Siamese forces but also included Annan's 372nd Infantry Division, the 7th Armored Division, and the 244 Mountain Division, comprising 3 units in total. The entire Siamese Second Army Group, numbering over 70,000, was deeply encircled by Jekka Group's mechanical army, in coordination with 2 of Jekka Group's heavy composite brigades, 4 light composite brigades, and 6 infantry divisions, forming a massive encirclement of over 100 kilometers. Jekka Group deployed a total force of 120,000, achieving the essence of lightning war by overwhelming with superior numbers and annihilating the enemy in mobile warfare, leaving them unable to react or reinforce. On January 27th, Jekka Group launched an encirclement attack on the Siamese Second Army Group within the circle. Armored forces led by Mecha stormed in irresistibly, ripping through their defenses and leaving the corpses of Siamese and Anan troops scattered everywhere. It took 2 days to completely annihilate this force. On January 29th, the 3rd Mecha Combat Brigade advanced towards the eastern direction of the Karamu defense line, pushing forward to Siam Bay, cutting off the Siamese's hopes of resupplying the Karamu defense line by sea. Every day, new battle reports arrived, with the Karamu defense line under severe threat from Jekka Group's offensive. As Jekka Group charged vigorously forward, within a command observation room, military observers from Western countries watched the satellite-relayed images, the atmosphere extremely tense. A military observer from the beautiful country, N.I. Maizen, sat stiffly in his seat, the screen in front of him displaying battlefield imagery relayed by satellite. The breakthroughs by the Spider Mecha were utterly ruthless, coordinating with the heavy infantry for a shockingly rapid advance. It seems very difficult to hold the Karamu defense line. Even using all available forces, they couldn't stop those mecha from advancing. N.I. Maizen offered a bitter smile. Although the beautiful country wasn't directly involved in the fighting, they provided substantial support to the Siamese forces. Not to mention the provision of various weapons and logistical aid. On the battlefield, satellite reconnaissance intelligence from the beautiful country was shared with Siam. For example, when Siamese artillery fired, given the lack of air superiority and the inability to launch reconnaissance aircraft and high-altitude drones, their striking accuracy relied entirely on information from the beautiful country's satellites. Without high-resolution military reconnaissance satellites of their own and with drones ineffective due to loss of air superiority, and many radars destroyed in air raids, Siam was practically blind. Without the help of the beautiful country, they could only determine firing positions based on reports from the front lines, and given the insufficient training of Siamese artillery, their effectiveness and flexibility were much worse. Unfortunately, even with satellite intelligence support, the Karamu defense line was in disarray. The defenses, which had seemed as solid as rock before the war, were continuously broken through by Jekka Group's coordinated mecha and infantry attacks. Unexpectedly, Jekka Group brought genetic warriors and super soldiers to coordinate with the mecha in combat, also converting the chassis of Spider Mecha into many new types of large mecha. Otherwise, our defenses wouldn't have been breached so quickly. A military observer from the Great British Empire, Lam, sighed. It wasn't that their defenses weren't strong enough. It was that the variety and the power of Jekka Group's revamped large mecha were unexpectedly formidable. It's really surprising, combining large mecha with heavy infantry for joint operations. Jekka Group is fighting a new era lightning war. The German military observer Orazio pondered thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on the battlefield imagery transmitted by satellite. Over these days, Jekka Group's innovative tactics had caught his attention. Germany had little stake in Siam. He was here to see what new military tactics would emerge from Jekka Group, and they certainly didn't disappoint him. Initially, Orazio thought that under the modern military system, it was no longer feasible to employ World War II-style massed armor blitzkriegs, relying on mobility for lightning attacks and deep encirclements. However, through this war, Jekka Group showed him that it wasn't that lightning war tactics were outdated, but that modern military equipment needed innovation. Clearly, in this era of mecha military transformation, Jekka Group was leading the world. Wait, what was that? Magnify the satellite. Go back to the last footage. Suddenly, Orazio seemed to spot something, his eyes widening. As the satellite reconnaissance image zoomed in, a startling sight entered Orazio's view. He saw a force of mecha appearing in a mountain range, all being spider mecha, climbing over mountains with their massive metal legs inserted into rocky crevices. Gentlemen, it appears Siam is in great trouble. Horatio noted the location displayed on the satellite map, quickly sketched on a map, and then looked up excitedly. There's a force of mecha from Jekka Group. Their direction of movement is to break through the Baleo mountain range. Not far past here is the retreat route of the Karamu defense line. They are planning to completely encircle the Siamese Four Countries army. Horatio became more and more excited as he spoke. Of German descent, he had studied lightning warfare extensively, and upon looking at the Jekka Group's troop movements on the map, he made a judgment understanding Jekka Group's intentions. Once, his forebears had relied on mobile assault tactics to deliver the world-shocking lightning wars, repeatedly using armored units for deep breakthroughs that caught enemies by surprise. Often, while the front-line forces were still fighting, the rear would already be collapsing from the armored units' onslaught, then becoming encircled, divided, and consumed piece by piece. God, the speed of these mecha troops is very fast, much faster than the armored units. I estimate that they will be able to cross the Baleo mountain range in at most 12 hours and appear behind the Karamu defense line. Once their retreat is cut off, the armies of the Karamu defense line will become sitting ducks. Horatio's eyes shone brightly, completely oblivious to the other military observers whose expressions had changed. What? Jekka Group has such a big appetite? Let me take a look, said Enai Maizen as he saw the satellite reconnaissance images. His head seemed to swell as he snatched the map and saw the position marked by Horatio. The strategic depth of the Karamu defense line was long, spanning over 300 kilometers. Chumphon province itself wasn't large, as it was bordered by Siam Bay to the east, making retreat by sea impossible. To the south lay the Baleo mountain range, which stretched for 1,100 kilometers along the borders of Chan country and Siam and continued from the southern part of the Himalayas. Most of its peaks rose above 1,800 meters, including 8 roughly parallel ridges running north to south, with rugged trails and deep valleys in between. It would be no problem for small groups to cross, but it was unthinkable for armies of hundreds of thousands to navigate that terrain. Thus, once blocked off, the Siamese forces amassed at the Karamu defense line would be like beating a dog in a dead end, completely enclosed and trapped. And as for the satellite reconnaissance images, the sudden appearance of the mecha troops suggested they were climbing over the Baleo mountain range. Once they crossed, they would appear directly behind the Karamu defense line, clearly intending to engulf the several 100,000 defenders there. Spider mechas can actually climb mountains and cross rivers. Japan's military observer Nakatani Keiji was dumbstruck. Watching the mecha troops appear on the satellite surveillance images, the heavy spider mechas were capable of scaling the rugged mountain passes, an impossible feat for armored tank units. This is practically a repeat of the Maginot Line. The Siamese army is in big trouble. At Horatio's words, Andrain, the French military observer next to him, darkened with anger. What kind of stupidity are you spouting, you German barbarian? If you can't find a good example, you might as well stay quiet. Andrain glared at him, his gaze murderous. That was because the Maginot Line mentioned by Horatio was an eternal pain for the French people. During World War II, France built the so-called impregnable Maginot Line along the German border, stationing 1 million troops. Yet, Germany's armored units bypassed the Maginot Line through the Ardennes forest, directly penetrating deep into France's heartland and rendering the Maginot Line useless. This not only led to its collapse but also contributed significantly to France's unprecedented surrender of millions of its troops in just 39 days, achieving an astonishing military record. As a result, the Maginot Line became a wall of national shame and lament for the French people. Now, Horatio's comparison of the Maginot Line to the situation at hand was understandably distressing for Andrain. Sorry, my analogy might not have been good, but Jekka Group's move to send the mecha troops over the Baleo mountain range is even more shocking than breaching the Maginot Line. Moreover, the Karamu defense line isn't on par with your Maginot Line. Besides, the Maginot Line was reputedly garrisoned by the world's greatest army, an honor the Siamese army simply can't claim. Horatio retorted sarcastically, seemingly unable to mention the Maginot Line without a sneer, infuriating Andrain to the point of turning red in the face. You defeated nation. What right do you have to speak like this? Andrain couldn't hold back and punched Horatio right in the face. You cowards of France who surrendered in 39 days, if it wasn't for the beautiful country and the Mao bear, where would you get the right to speak? Arajo was incensed, striking back with his fist decisively. Two countries with age-old rivalries immediately started fighting here, engaging in battle with great relish. And Meisen could no longer pay attention to the ridiculous farce of these two idiots. His mind was entirely occupied by the mechanical army crossing the Baleo mountain range. If the Karamu defense line were truly breached, the 350,000 troops deployed here would all be wiped out in one fell swoop. At that thought, Meisen broke out into a cold sweat, disregarded everyone else, and hurriedly grabbed the map before running towards the Siamese military headquarters. The beautiful country had hoped to trap Siam and the Jekka group in a war of attrition, letting the Jekka group become mired in the quagmire of war. They didn't want to see Siam's elite forces completely sacrificed at the Karamu defense line. The defense line towards Huyu Valley is in critical danger. The 285th Infantry Brigade has suffered heavy combat losses. We request reinforcements. Tell them our reinforcements are already on the way, and I need them to hold their position for 2 hours at all costs. The defense line at Lilua town has collapsed. The 330th Independent Infantry Regiment disintegrated without engaging in battle, with the entire 2,800 troops surrendering to the enemy mechanical army under the leadership of Colonel Chiu Fengyang. Immediately dispatch the reserve troops to reinforce the rear defense line, and report to His Majesty the King to punish that coward Chiu Fengyang. General, it's bad news. The Jinzipo defense line has been ambushed by a total of 15 mechas, along with a large number of armed helicopters and fighter jets bombarding our defense line, which has now been breached. In the vast rear of the Karamu defense line, inside an underground command center made of reinforced concrete, the Siamese headquarters located here was in total chaos, with continuous reports of calls for help and breaches in the defense line. Every hour, there were either reports of one defense line being in peril or another collapsing, causing those commanding generals and staff officers to be extremely anxious, their lips blistering from the tension. The overall commander in charge of this battle was Wang Yenting, who had just replaced the former Chief of General Staff, Narong. At this moment, faced with emergency reports from all fronts, he was completely at a loss, his head feeling like it would explode, now realizing that the position he had taken over was a hot potato. And what Meisen had walked into was just such a scene. General Wang Yen, this is what our military observer has discovered. Your troops are in grave danger. The Jekka group wants to swallow you whole. With the map in hand, Meisen directly approached Wang Yenting to relay the situation he had discovered. Wang Yenting was utterly stunned and took a good while to snap back to reality. They're crossing over from the Baleo mountain range. The Jekka group madmen, how dare their mecha, how dare they? Wang Yenting's lips trembled, his entire being close to collapse, because he realized that, with his current troop deployment, he couldn't find a capable force to defend against the mecha army in a short period. In my view, we should now retreat from the Karamu defense line. Before they completely encircle us, we should save as many as possible and preserve our fighting strength. Meisen sighed, offering his best advice at the moment. Even without this surprise attack force coming over the Baleo mountain range, in Meisen's view, the Siamese army couldn't hold much longer. According to the advancing speed of the Jekka group, within a week at most, their defense lines would be thoroughly ruptured by the Jekka group. Now, with what the Jekka group was doing, it was clear they had a voracious appetite. They weren't content with just a major victory. They wanted to annihilate the 350,000 elite troops deployed at the Karamu defense line. After being stupefied for quite a long time, Wang Yenting finally said despondently, I will report to the king and arrange for the troops to retreat as soon as possible. Upon discovering Jekka group's surprise attack attempt at the Baleo mountain range, the defending forces of the Siamese four countries at the Karamu defense line, in order not to be completely encircled and trapped, finally made a decision to retreat from the Karamu defense line. But the problem was, retreating was easier said than done. On the front lines of the defense, Jekka group's assaults came wave after wave, their mecha army constantly tearing through their defenses. Already struggling to withstand the Jekka group's mecha onslaughts, to retreat meant to abandon their positions. They simply couldn't outrun the mechas. Once they left the cover and fortifications, retreat would turn into a rout. Even behind the Karamu defense line, they were not safe. After detecting unusual movements in the Siamese forces and their intention to flee from the Karamu defense line, Jekka Group, which held air superiority, continuously launched airstrikes, bombing railways, roads, bridges, and various other transportation facilities in Champaran province, crippling their transport and logistics capabilities, making it challenging for the troops at the Karamu defense line to conduct a rapid retreat through transportation lines. Facing the many obstacles set by Jekka Group, the Siam military still gritted their teeth and resorted to a desperate measure. They ordered the soldiers on the front lines of the Karamu defense line to hold their positions, while the forces in the rear to disengage from their defensive works and retreat from the Karamu defense line at the fastest speed possible. They hoped to sacrifice a portion of their forces, a tactical withdrawal to preserve the majority of their effective fighting strength and retain some elite soldiers for Siam. This retreat operation was quickly confirmed once again by Jekka Group. Their air force started high-intensity sorties for bombing. Still, it wasn't enough to deter the Siamese forces from their determination to escape, because the air force of Jekka Group was also limited and couldn't possibly wipe out all of the enemies on the ground. The Baleo Mountain Range. How Guyu was piloting Mecha A-180 along a rugged mountain trail. Due to years of erosion, the mountainside exposed large areas of rock, with stubborn weeds growing in the crevices. In this sparsely populated area with towering ridges and deep valleys, where the terrain was complex and difficult, a mecha army was advancing. Looking around, one could see spider mechas crawling and climbing on the mountain. With their metallic long legs, relying on powerful gripping force and balance control, they were moving through regions that were inaccessible to regular troops. But the mecha army could accomplish this seemingly impossible feat, with mechas overcoming mountains and valleys, and when they encountered particularly impassable areas, they used cannons to create a path or employed ant-style engineering mechas to build bridges and lay roads, allowing the mecha army to pass through smoothly. After climbing over another mountain ridge, How Guyu suddenly felt his view become broad and unobstructed. There were no more obstacles ahead, and what appeared before him were open plains and rolling hills. Finally out, How Guyu took a deep breath, climbing out of the mecha's hatch, and couldn't help but shout. The rough terrain had been torturous for him. Although the spider mecha could scale peaks, the terrible road conditions made it an experience he would never want to go through again. After one trip across the Baleo mountain range, his spider mecha was covered with all sorts of scratches. It was an eyesore, especially the various mechanical faults caused by the complex terrain. Even the reliability of the spider mecha wasn't immune to issues, costing them a lot of time. If it had been regular armored troops, they would have driven their vehicles to breakdown without any hope of passing through this restricted area for armored troops. If only the Air Force could have flown me over. Climbing mountains is too damn exhausting. Muttering complaints, How Guyu wished that, if possible, the Air Force could have transported him across the Baleo mountain range without all the hardship. Unfortunately, the weight of the spider mecha was a given fact, and globally, only a few military, large-scale, long-range strategic transport aircraft could manage such a task. But such transport planes were treasures of their respective nations, and Jekka Group couldn't purchase them. The enemy is retreating. Everyone refuel, and let's speed up to catch up. Once all of the mechas were refueled, the mecha army set out again, with each mecha army unit carrying genetic warriors and super soldiers. They moved at full speed towards the plains. The spider mechas, with their speeds unrestricted, could run faster than most reconnaissance armored vehicles. The territory of Champaran province wasn't large, so for the main battle spider mechas, it took just a little over an hour before they could see those retreating Siam soldiers on the plain. It was a division of infantry from the Annan army. They had taken advantage of the night to avoid Jekka Group's rampant warplanes. While the warplanes could operate around the clock, their efficiency was impaired at night, and their troops were relatively well preserved. However, their luck ran out upon encountering the mecha army. Right after an encounter with the main battle spider mechas, they immediately formed a battle line and launched an assault on the panicked Siamese forces. Boom! 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 With one shell landing, in the open plain with no cover, any soldier within the core destruction radius of the artillery shell was reduced to mush by the blast wave. Mixed with the flying debris of rocks and soil, erasing any sign that a human had once been there. Hao Guyu was leading the charge, enthusiastically driving his Spider main battle mecha ahead. "Eat shells, little monkeys," Hao Guyu sneered, as his 230mm machine guns fired continuously, piercing through the top cover of a main battle tank, and then switching targets, piercing through several armored vehicles and the soldiers they carried who had no time to escape before meeting a grim end within. During the march, the 4 doors of 20mm machine guns and 8 strands of 12.7mm heavy machine guns opened fire in succession. The Spider mecha instantly became a porcupine that poured a constant barrage of bullets, tearing apart the bodies of one Siamese soldier after another, accompanied by the main gun's occasional booming fire, annihilating everything with terrifying firepower. In just a short confrontation, this infantry division with over 5,000 men had been smashed by the mechanical army. Encountering Spider mechas on the vast plains, even armored torrents could be blown apart, let alone these infantry divisions primarily composed of infantry. The battle was a one-sided slaughter. In less than half an hour, this infantry division had been annihilated by the mechanical army. After a brief resupply of ammunition, the mechanical army set off again, destroying one organized enemy force after another based on targets identified by the Air Force. These forces that had escaped from the Karamu defense line had no trenches or fortifications on the plains and faced annihilation when encountering the mechanical army. No need to say more. The entire rear of the Karamu defense line plunged into complete despair as the mechanical army launched its surprise attack. Because the highways and bridges were bombed, and Jekka Group maintained air superiority, the attempts by the Siamese army to flee could hardly escape the notice of the Jekka Group. They either suffered air raids and bombings or were subjected to the devastating blitz of the mechanical army. Later, Jekka Group even deployed a portion of genetic warriors and super soldiers by helicopters and small-scale paratrooper drops to encircle and block the scattered Siamese soldiers who had lost their units. Spider mechas wouldn't be deployed for just a few soldiers, but such numbers of soldiers were just right for the super soldiers to deal with. With air superiority and the advantage of the mechanical army, the plains behind the Karamu defense line quickly became Jekka Group's hunting ground. One by one, troops were easily annihilated by Jekka Group on the plains. They could hold on for a while in fortifications, but on the plains they were sitting ducks. Towards the end, upon encountering Jekka Group's mechanical army, these soldiers began to surrender, or they simply sat down on the spot, no longer attempting to escape, waiting to be captured by the Jekka Group. Including those Siamese troops holding out on the Karamu defense line, they had also been broken by this time. Being discarded pieces, their morale was low. Under the fierce attack of the Jekka Group, they surrendered in droves, emerging from their covers with hands held high overhead, unwilling to sacrifice themselves in futile resistance. In only 2.5 days, with the mechanical army that had successfully attacked from the Baleo mountain range blocking the rear of the Karamu defense line, the forces of Siam, Anan, Jinla, and Lansong that were dead or surrendered, this Karamu defense line was thus breached by the Jekka Group. The attack and defense battle of the Karamu defense line began at 9:01 a.m. on January 24, 2025. Jekka Group successively deployed 3 mechanical combat brigades as the main assault force, along with 2 heavy composite brigades, 2 medium-sized composite brigades, 4 light composite brigades, as well as 7 infantry divisions, 2 motorized infantry divisions, and 1 engineering division, and tore through the Siamese 6 army groups of 350,000 men in the Karamu defense line like a hot knife through butter. Jekka Group's mechanical army and the Air Force composed the Rapid Deep Penetration Force, which swiftly tore apart, encircled, swept, and annihilated the outdated and vast Siamese 4 countries army. By February 1st, the Karamu campaign had come to an end with the Siamese 4 countries army suffering a total of 163,000 killed, 172,000 captured, including the wounded. Jekka Group's own casualties were just over 3,000, of which 732 were killed, 2,259 were wounded in battle, and 43 died from non-combat related causes. Such an exaggerated casualty ratio was naturally thanks to the meritorious achievements of Jekka Group's mechanical army, which, through coordinated new-style mechanized infantry's lightning war tactics, consumed this astonishingly large enemy force. Compared to the past when Germany used lightning war tactics against Poland with a casualty ratio of 130, Jekka Group's achievements are undoubtedly more remarkable, with a casualty ratio reaching 1 to 110. Thus, with the Siamese Four Countries Army stationed at the Karamu defense line wiped out in one battle, only more than 10,000 remnants managed to escape the encirclement, but it was too late to make a difference. As expected, Jekka Group took only a week to break through the Karamu defense line, which was over 300 kilometers deep, and surrounded and annihilated 340,000 troops, with only a little over 10,000 fortunate enough to escape. When this news was revealed by the media and Jekka Group held a press conference to announce this good news to the world, the whole world was shocked. Although the military forces of these Southeast Asian countries like Siam were somewhat inferior, Jekka Group's amazing casualty ratio and the astonishing results of encirclement and annihilation, the deployment of various new equipment and tactics, all left people in awe and astonished. Shit, this can't be fake news, right? Just a week of grinding ranks and not paying much attention to the news, and Jekka Group has charged through the Karamu defense line and encircled and eradicated and captured 340,000 people? This news is a bit too exaggerated. Oh my god! Have you guys noticed Jekka Group's tactics and new equipment on the Karamu battlefield, using genetic warriors and super soldiers in combination with large mechas for combat support, is just like the new era of armored assault tactics. Thanks to this, Jekka Group has pulled off an incredibly smooth penetration, encirclement, and lightning war. Seeing those Scorpion flame sprayer mechas, ant-style engineering mechas, B air defense mechas, these new mechas based on the Spider mecha chassis prove that large mechas have great potential and the future is definitely the era of mechas. We are witnessing a whole new military revolution, thanks to Jekka Group's mech wind. The Siamese army is just too trashy, getting beaten so badly by the Jekka Group. How were they daring enough to be so provocative before, even making preemptive war declarations? And this is the result. Hey, up there, hasn't the Jekka Group already released evidence? The Siam king was just doing the beautiful country's bidding. They even sacrificed their own old king to find a pretext for war. Haha, what I'm looking forward to the most is whether the beautiful country will also enter the war. If they start fighting the Jekka Group, that will be some show to watch. Online, the onlookers buzzed with discussion, marveling at the terror of the Jekka Group's mechanical army. Meanwhile, in the royal palace in Manchester, the capital of Siam, a state of panic had already set in with the arrival of the grim news from the Karamu battle. The Siam king, Puping, thundered at the military conference, holding several generals accountable and lashing out at the chief of general staff, Wan Yenting, for his inaction and for ruining his excellent situation. After the tirade, he ordered the generals to quickly come up with a plan to stop the Jekka Group from advancing further into the nation's hinterland. Meanwhile, he sought out the beautiful country's CIA agents, Shong and Smith, because Puping knew that the situation was dire for Siam, and it was unlikely they could cope with the Jekka Group on their own. They needed the support of their beautiful country daddy. In a rush, Puping headed to a secure room, going through multiple checks and repeatedly assuring there were no eavesdropping or secret filming devices before feeling safe enough to enter. He had no choice. The evidence that the Jekka Group had leaked made Puping realize that he wasn't safe even in his own surroundings. With the Jekka Group secretly watching him, he had to be careful, not only staying secluded but also continuously raising his security level. Send troops? Shong, who had been waiting, shook his head immediately after hearing Puping's request. Puping, it's just not possible for us to send troops directly. Our country wouldn't approve it, he replied. Shong rejected Puping's request outright, having been authorized by the beautiful country and knowing its stance towards this war. If the Jekka Group were to get bogged down in this war, the beautiful country might indeed send troops to kick them when they're down. But the beautiful country itself was shocked by the mecha strength Jekka Group had displayed. Even though the beautiful country's air force was strong, relying solely on the air force wasn't enough to conquer a country. Moreover, it remained uncertain how effective airstrikes would be against Jekka Group's extensive underground facilities. Ground troops were necessary to make progress. Should troops be committed, they would have to confront the Jekka Group's mechanical army, and casualties could become difficult to control. The beautiful country wasn't like it used to be, having made too many enemies worldwide. They didn't dare easily deploy ground forces to the Middle East, So how could they dare send troops to fight the even more terrifying Jekka group, unless there were irreconcilable interests and conflicts of such enormity that the beautiful country was willing to risk war over them? Why, at this stage, aren't you willing to fight against the Jekka group? Why won't you come to our aid? Are you just going to watch us get defeated? Puping's eyes were bloodshot. He had gone to war with the Jekka group at the behest of the beautiful country. He had provoked as they asked, fought as they commanded. He believed he had done his best. Now that the situation was unfavorable and he needed the beautiful country's support, they were unwilling to send troops, standing back and washing their hands of it, which infuriated Puping. Lord Pupeng, haven't we already given you enough help? Intelligence support, military equipment support, and even found you 3 allies. Instead of asking why we don't send troops, you should first consider why you have managed to turn this war into such a mess. Xiong snorted coldly, his eyes filled with displeasure as he looked at Pupeng, who dared to speak to him with such an accusatory tone. Did he not understand who had helped him ascend to power? Pupeng's voice faltered, his face showing embarrassment as he defensively argued. The Jekka group's strength is so formidable. We have already done our utmost. You also saw those spider mechas. It's not that our forces haven't tried, but the enemy possesses Gundams. But still, it shouldn't take just 1 week to wipe out a 350,000-strong army. Even if it were 350,000 pigs let loose on the Karamu defense line, the Jekka group wouldn't be able to capture them all in a week. Shuang's words carried a trace of disdain. Although the Jekka group's mechanical army was unexpectedly strong, was Pupeng entirely blameless? The military might described as pathetic, he had heard about it. Toward the end, they rushed to surrender to the Jekka group, much like France during World War II. They, the beautiful country, supported Siam to counter the Jekka group, hoping they could stall the opponent's advancement. However, Siam's performance was undoubtedly disappointing. Not to mention slowing down the Jekka group's growth, it would be a minor blessing if they didn't end up as nutrients for their opponent's growth. With an increasingly ugly expression, Pupeng forcefully suppressed his anger and said, "Regardless, now that the Jekka group's army is advancing, without external support, we, Siam, simply are no match for the Jekka group. Mr. Xiong, you, the beautiful country, don't want to see us in Siam bullied or even overrun by the Jekka group, do you?" That remark truly hit home, and Xiong fell silent. The fighting capability of the Siamese 4 countries was extremely subpar in this war, but the beautiful country was even less inclined to see the Jekka group ruling supreme in Southeast Asia. The Jekka group was already tough to contain. Allowing them to occupy vast territories would only make them tougher to deal with in the future. Seeing a possibility, Pupeng promptly persuaded again. If the beautiful country enters the war, the Jekka group will definitely not dare to act recklessly. They will certainly withdraw from our territory, and then we can devise a way to deal with the large mechas and choose an opportunity to resolve the Jekka group for good. For Pupeng at this moment, it was like he was a man about to drown. Annan, Jinla, and Lansong countries are of no use. The beautiful country is truly the only lifeline. If he could drag the beautiful country into this, then his own country would be saved, and his throne secured. Because with the beautiful country officially entering the battle, the focal point of the Jekka group would definitely shift to the beautiful country. Whether the Jekka group withdrew due to fear of the beautiful country's renown, or sought to challenge the beautiful country head-on, it would be a significant advantage for Siam. The former scenario would ensure the integrity of their sovereignty, and the latter was simpler. Once the beautiful country entered the war, any casualties that occurred subsequently wouldn't allow for a simple withdrawal, like another Vietnam War or Afghan War, bound to continue for a long time. Or perhaps the beautiful country could quickly eliminate the Jekka group. Either way, as long as the influence of the beautiful country remained in Siam, his position and safety were secured. Although a puppet supported by the beautiful country, Pupeng still had his own ideas. Considering the character of Su Jie, the leader of the Jekka group, do you think they will be intimidated and retreat? It's impossible for us to enter the battle. The decision has already been made inside our country. This war belongs to the 5 countries of Southeast Asia. Xiong watched Pupeng coldly, This guy was not being honest. They, the beautiful country, incited the 4 Siamese countries to participate in the war, aiming to mire the Jekka group in a quagmire of war, not for them, the beautiful country, to be trapped themselves. If the beautiful country wanted to enter the battle, they would have formed a coalition long ago, calling Europe and those Malay lackeys from Southeast Asia, not waiting until now. To really enter the battle, given the fighting capability that the Jekka group had shown, the beautiful country would inevitably face significant losses, unable to eliminate the Jekka group quickly, and if several defeats were linked, exposing the weaknesses of the beautiful country. Even their hegemony would be shaken, something the beautiful country could not tolerate. Therefore, after the Karamu battle, the beautiful country had already made a decision. Even though those mammoth military industries within had been pushing for this matter, it was opposed by various quarters and failed to pass the proposal to go to war. The military-industrial complex wanted to participate in the war because they could sell weapons, ammunition, missiles to the beautiful country's government with one hand and pocket vast amounts of US dollars with the other, becoming the true biggest winner behind the scenes of the war. But the beautiful country is not just dominated by the military-industrial complex. Other forces don't want to rashly start a war burdening economic development, hurt only their own interests, fattening only the military-industrial complex. The Jekka group is not some small, feeble nation that could be easily crushed, and not being careful might even drag their own status as rulers of the Blue Star, benefiting Mao Bear countries, which is probably what those Mao Bear countries wanted to see. So you're just going to abandon us? Pu Peng gritted his teeth, seeing Shuang's intentions of truly wanting to stand by idly. On intelligence and military equipment, we will continue to provide support, including internationally. We will host mediation, organizing support from various countries for you, Siam, to prompt the Jekka group to restrain themselves and withdraw their troops. Shuang stated his side's demand. It was impossible for them to enter the fray. They could only rely on verbal support and spirit to back Siam. Your lip service is useless. I need an army. Can you scare off the Jekka group's proud and fierce soldiers with words alone? As soon as Pupping heard these words, he became furious. He had been pushed into starting a war by the beautiful country only to be abandoned when the situation turned unfavorable. This was simply inhumane. Pupping, you seem to have forgotten your place. Remember, you were the one we supported into power. Without us, you would not have reached this point today, one of them said. Shuang banged the table. Pupping was disrespecting his elders, daring to speak to him in such a tone. If you from the beautiful country don't step in, why should I rely on you? I might as well completely switch allegiance to the Jekka group, said Pupping. Pupping voiced his true feelings. He was ready to turn against them. Is that so? Su Jie of the Jekka group is known for his retaliation. How did you insult him before? You slandered him by accusing him of assassinating your father, and even demanded he apologize by kneeling at your father's tomb. You think surrendering will earn the Jekka group's recognition? Go ahead and try. I don't know about Siam, but rest assured, you'll definitely lose your head. Another ridiculed. Shuang stood up, gave Pupping a pat on the shoulder with a sneer, and then left the chamber, not fearful at all of Pupping losing control, for he had no other options. Pupping stood frozen, his face alternating between shades of green and white. He had heard of the Jekka group's world-famous top-level corporate wars in Sioux-style Iedo, where a dump truck might meet an explosive end, or simply deploying the steel camp to riddle someone with bullets, which was far more ruthless than being shot in the back 8 times. From this, one could see just how domineering Su Jie's character was. Now, in a position of weakness, his surrender would certainly not be accepted. Thinking this, Puping's expression was immensely complicated. He felt like slapping himself. If he had known this would happen, he would not have spoken so harshly and completely alienated the Jekka group. No, I still have 300,000 to 400,000 troops and a vast territory. As long as I rally the public, the enemy will surely retreat in the face of a people's war, he thought. With a slight tremor in his palm, Pupping convinced himself and hurried out of the chamber to gather his subordinates, determined to halt the Jekka group's advance. Meanwhile, after conquering the Karamu defense line, the entire Chumphon province promptly fell under the control of the Jekka group. As mentioned before, the Siam map resembles an axe, and Chumphon Province is located at the junction of the Axe Head and Handle. When Chumphon Province was occupied, Siam was split in two, losing contact between the north and south. The main forces of the Jekka army, resting and resupplying in Chumphon Province, sharpened their knives, simultaneously pointing straight at the heartland of Siam, while another detachment of 50,000 troops began moving south. This force comprised a medium synthetic brigade, 3 infantry divisions, and 1 mountain division, advancing south from Chumphon Province and systematically conquering territories. Because the Siam army had been drawn to the Karamu defense line, those remaining in the southern Thailand region were only newly conscripted militias and police forces yet to be properly trained. Without even needing to deploy the Ace Mechanical Army, the Jekka group, using regular troops, advanced southward without meeting significant resistance. The Siamese forces they encountered along the way quickly succumbed, and they successively occupied Bamuri Prefecture, Ranong Province, Phang Nga, Chumphon Province, Surat Thani Province, Phang Nga, Phuket, Songkhla Province, Krami Prefecture, Nakhon Prefecture, Phang Nga Province, Boyu Prefecture, Sadan Prefecture, Pattani, Yala Prefecture, and Tiva Prefecture, a total of 16 prefectures. Out of Siam's 77 prefectures, a fifth of the territory was occupied in an instant. The local populace reacted diversely to the arrival of the Jekka group's forces. Some were hostile, while others welcomed them. Predominantly, however, the sentiment was welcoming. This was mainly because the people in the southern Thailand region were mostly not from Siam's economic core or major ethnic group. Siam is a multi-ethnic country with over 30 different ethnic groups, primarily Thais, who are concentrated in central Siam and wield considerable military and political power. Historically, they have expanded their influence into the surrounding ethnic regions, gradually forming the multi-ethnic Siam of today, including the Siam king being of Thai ethnicity. The ethnic tensions in Southeast Asia have existed for a long time, and the Thai have not been kind to other ethnicities outside their own. As such, the southern Thailand region predominantly comprises other ethnic groups' living areas, leading to prevalent separatist and independence movements in the region. When the Jekka group's army entered these areas, the will to resist was low. Instead, many were elated, grateful to the Jekka group for driving away the oppressive rule of the Siamese Thai clan and began accepting Jekka group's governance. However, not everyone opposed it. Some lacked discernment and provoked the Jekka group's fury, especially in the 3 southernmost prefectures, Pattani, Yala Prefecture, and Tiva Prefecture. The population in these areas was predominantly Malay, and their territories bordered Johor, which was primarily comprised of Malays. These 3 prefectures were originally part of Johor before being conquered by Siam, and they had been hotspots for severe independence movements. When the Jekka group announced their control over the area, the local Malay rejoiced, becoming very active and immediately declared independence. Chumphon Province. Outside the military camp of Jekka group, a jeep slowly approached. In the back seat, a middle-aged man was feeling uneasy. He came from the Siam southern 3 prefectures, a local Malay representative named Jia Wangsunliang, and he was there specifically to discuss independence with the Jekka group. Originally, he had wanted to meet Su Jie directly, but to his surprise, Su Jie was in the military camp, so he had made his way there. Stop the car. At the entrance of the military camp, several guards stopped the vehicle. Who goes there? From the Foreign Affairs Department, Mr. Su wants to see this person. The driver presented the clearance paperwork. The soldiers conducted a thorough check before taking away the vehicle, and had other soldiers lead him into the interior of the camp. They actually make people walk. Jia Wangsunliang inwardly complained as he followed the soldiers' steps hesitantly. Never having been to a military camp before, he kept glancing around out of the corner of his eye. The camp was bustling, with soldiers patrolling and training everywhere, helicopters roaring through the sky from time to time, and military armored vehicles and supply trucks rumbling back and forth, the noise stirring his blood. Those eyes! Jia Wangsunliang's lips quivered as he noted the ferocity and terror in each pair of soldiers' eyes, especially those wearing special uniforms, whose gazes were 10 times more intimidating than being targeted by fierce tigers or lions. Jia Wangsunliang knew these were Jekka group's super soldiers. each of them capable of mass slaughter. As Jia Wangsunliang was still overwhelmed, a huge shadow loomed over from up ahead. It was a 12-meter-tall spider mecha passing by, its cold, immense body casting a vast shadow. Jia Wangsunliang's mouth hung open. After staring dumbfounded for several seconds, he suddenly shivered, his hair stood on end, and his legs went weak as an inexplicable fear took hold inside him. He had seen such mecha in videos, but witnessing them in reality, the shock to the senses was completely different. Stop daydreaming. Keep moving. Right. Upon hearing the soldiers shout, Jia Wangsunliang took a deep breath and hurriedly followed. Soon, Jia Wangsunliang followed the soldiers to a modified military tent, where he saw the man often featured in the news, the controller of Jekka Group, Su Jie. Jia Wangsunliang, representing all Malay citizens, has come to see Commander Su. Jia Wangsunliang spoke respectfully. The other man stood with his back to him, staring at a map on the wall, seemingly indifferent to his arrival. Take a look for me. What do you think about digging a canal here through the Kra Isthmus to collect tolls? The atmosphere grew a bit silent. After about 10 seconds, Su Jie's voice suddenly reached him, pointing at an area on the map and inquiring of Jia Wangsunliang. Commander Su, I'm not sure what to say. Jia Wangsunliang looked where Su Jie was pointing, his expression complex. Speak if I asked you to speak. Su Jie turned around, his gaze making Jia Wangsunliang very nervous. After a moment of hesitation, Jia Wangsunliang finally shared his thoughts. Commander Su, I think digging the canal is not appropriate. It will harm the interests of many countries and will face unanimous opposition. It's like robbing money from their pockets. The map behind Su Jie represented the current occupation map of Jekka Group in Siam, with a red line drawn by Su Jie across the Kra Isthmus in the territories of Chumphon Province and Ranong Province. The Kra Isthmus is a narrow strip of land between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, the narrowest part being about 56 kilometers wide. By digging a canal there, vessels could save about 1,200 kilometers compared to circumventing the Malacca Strait, inevitably turning it into a new economic hub. However, the problem was that Johor, also a Malacca Strait coastal country, itself benefited from the existence of Malacca. Though not as crucial as Lion City, if the Kra Isthmus Canal were to open, the whole of Johor, Jawa country, and Lion City would suffer significant economic losses. And since the southern three prefectures had a good relationship with Johor, being of the same Malay ethnicity, their desire for nation-building and independence was strongly supported by Johor. Or to put it another way, their call for independence was backed by Johor itself. If opposition were effective, there would be no need to form an army. When the canal opens later, beautiful country and its allies will have to pay more to pass here. It's much more profitable than robbery. If we rob too much, they would avoid this route. Su Jie scoffed, then looked at Jia Wangsunliang intently for several seconds, making Jia Wangsunliang feel unsettled, before suddenly asking, Do you southern three prefectures wish to build your own country? Yes. We are extremely grateful to Commander Su for your generosity in helping us drive away the Siamese Thai clan thugs and liberate our freedom. Over the years, our southern three prefectures have been oppressed and lived a tough life under the Siamese Thai clan. Now that we've rid ourselves of those bastards from Siam, we want to live our own lives and establish our own country. Therefore, we earnestly request Commander Su's approval. Jia Wangsunliang kneeled halfway on the ground and made his request known. Because of the war, in the propaganda of Jekka Group, it was portrayed that Siam had instigated it and Jekka Group had engaged in a just war, forced to liberate those oppressed people. In responding as such, Jia Wangsunliang was implying that Jekka Group had been fighting for the liberation of oppressed people, and now that they were liberated, they naturally wanted to live their own lives. Is this your idea, or the idea of the Malay elite landlords? It surely can't represent the will of the entire Malay population. Can it? Su Jie's smile was more a smirk, his piercing gaze causing Jia Wangsunliang to break out in a sweat, feeling as if all his thoughts and ideas were being seen through. Of course, it's the will of the entire Malay population. Jia Wangsunliang trembled, well aware of the actual situation in his own heart. Due to economic backwardness, inaccessible transportation, and historical reasons. The southern three prefectures had been forcibly annexed by Siam and had always been seeking an opportunity for independence. Although the lower class in the southern three prefectures did cause disturbances, it was actually the upper class that wanted independence. They aimed to gain real power over the southern three prefectures, to rule their own home as masters without having to look at the faces of the Siamese Thai clan. Moreover, they had received promises of support from Johor. The Malay of the southern three prefectures, in terms of race, language, and culture, were similar to Johor, and even if they had to be ruled, they would rather be ruled by Johor, to protect their wealth and safety and become the new elite class of Johor. As for the Jekka group, a foreign entity in the eyes of the Malay upper class, there was simply no common ground. I see. Well, I'll give you an answer now. As for establishing a country, I disagree. Su Jie tapped on the table, striking Jia Wengsunliang with a statement like a bolt from the blue. Why? Didn't the Jekka group claim to want to liberate the oppressed peoples? Jia Wengsunliang's eyes widened as he stood up in shock. We did say that, but it's only under the rule of the Jekka group that the people can be truly liberated, said Su Jie, his smile cruel and indifferent, directly shattering all of Jia Wengsunliang's illusions. Jia Wengsunliang felt a chilling anger, shocked by Su Jie's twisted logic. The other party had made it clear that they wanted to annex the southern three prefectures, no different from what the Siamese Thai clan had done before. Independence is the will of the entire Malay population. No one can stop us, no matter who they are. Nowadays, everything is about democracy. We want freedom, we want democracy, we want an independence referendum. Jia Wengsunliang's voice was very passionate. The Malays, with a population of just over 2 million, would only be a microstate even if independence were successful, but as the saying goes, better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. Although the Malays did not have this saying, the sentiment was common. Jia Wengsunliang's family was also among the top Malay elite, controlling vast lands and businesses in the southern three prefectures. If they could achieve independence without others controlling them and instead taking the field as the referee themselves, their businesses and lands could expand rapidly, and the family would grow and strengthen. Interesting. Su Jie laughed. He really couldn't understand the thought processes of people like Jia Wengsunliang. The Siamese Thai clan had been able to rule over them, imposing military control over the southern three prefectures to prevent the overflow of separatism, so they dared only to cautiously scheme for independence, not bold enough to let the Siamese Thai clan know, fearing repression and catastrophe. Now that the Jekka group had defeated Siam, they came running to negotiate independence, and Su Jie didn't know who had given them the courage to think that the Jekka group, capable of defeating the Siamese army, would be more amenable than the Siam government. Commander Su, you need to listen to the voice of our Malay people. Everyone is demanding independence. You can't go against the major trend. Jia Wengsunliang wanted to say more, but Su Jie had already lost interest in listening further. Take him away. Yes, sir. Soon, soldiers came in and dragged away Jia Wengsunliang, who still intended to prattle on, not giving him a chance to make a scene. Su Jie turned back around, his gaze settling on the area of the southern three prefectures. Shao Qian, do you think I'm still being too merciful? With his left hand, Su Jie picked up a pen and drew a cross over the southern three prefectures, while his right hand stroked the thousand-handed centipede that had crawled out of his sleeve and shrunken to the size of a small cat. Hearing Su Jie's voice, the thousand-handed centipede just rolled onto its back, enjoying his caresses and purring contentedly. It seems you agree too. Then let's have a purging storm. If we don't clean up the territories we occupy well, there will always be some pests that are an eyesore. Su Jie seemed to understand the words of the thousand-hand centipede and picked up the phone to call the military stationed in southern Thailand. 2 days later, in Pattani, a luxurious manor was hosting a party. Those in attendance were influential members of powerful families from the southern three prefectures, and their conversation centered on the topic of founding a new nation. I've always said the Jekka group was no good. They, like the Siamese, are also after our land. A middle-aged man holding a glass of red wine spoke with deep dissatisfaction. He was Chikapi, a grain merchant who was the largest landlord in the southern three prefectures and a firm proponent of independence. Mr. Jia Zhenshigzunliang also held a glass of wine, looking particularly worried. I just can't shake this feeling of unease. Do you think the Jekka group might take action against us? Would they dare face such enormous public condemnation? The southern 3 prefectures are our territory. Even if the Jekka group truly wants to rule over this area, they would still need us to manage it. Chikapi scoffed. His family had deep roots in the southern 3 prefectures, with vast tracts of land and businesses in grain processing, transportation, electricity, and mining. His family members had married extensively into local administration and business, their influence permeating politics, commerce, policing, and judiciary, controlling many aspects of the region. In ancient times, they would be considered members of the scholar gentry class, a group that even the court had to appease and manage, as imperial power did not extend into the countryside. The underdevelopment and isolation of the southern 3 prefectures meant that the lower classes held more conservative views. Being Malay, they tended to trust only their own, making it difficult for external forces to intervene. This included the Siam government, which also failed to resolve the lingering issue for a long time. That's right. This is our land. We are the true masters here. If the Jekka group dares to cause trouble, we'll make them regret it. We Malays are not to be trifled with. Just because they defeated Siam doesn't mean they can bully us. Why should we be ruled by the Jekka group? We still need to seek the opportunity to establish our own country. The nearby notables all voiced their agreement with Chikapi's remarks. Upon reflection, Mr. Jia nodded and said, "We must blow this up. Let the international community see our resolve. I suggest we stir up civilian demonstrations to proclaim our desire for independence." That's not enough. Doesn't the Jekka group have stationed troops? We can get the people to make trouble, throw Molotov cocktails, and such. Chikapi sneered, offering an even more radical suggestion. Won't that be too reckless? Mr. Jia shuddered at the thought. Having been to the Jekka group's military camp, he felt this suggestion was somewhat inappropriate. What is there to fear? Would they dare open fire on civilians? We will have people broadcast live and record everything. If they open fire, even better. Once it goes online, the reputation of the Jekka group will be ruined. Would they dare? Just as Chikapi's voice fell, they suddenly heard an unusual noise. A buzzing sound came from the sky, and gusts of wind blew from afar. The elites in the midst of their party looked up in confusion and saw 4 helicopters flying low under the night sky, armed systems hanging below them, with Jekka Group's logo clearly marked on the sides of the helicopters. People below, you are surrounded. Surrender immediately or face execution if you resist. Shouts came from the helicopter, and shortly after, blinding searchlights came on, making it hard for the group of notables to look directly at them. The scene immediately descended into chaos. Mr. Jia's face turned ashen, watching soldiers rappelling from the helicopters and armored vehicles, and troop carriers forcibly entering the premises of the manor. His face suddenly turned deathly pale. Ring, ring. At the same time, Mr. Jia's phone started to ring. It was a call from one of his trusted subordinates. Mr. Jia, it's bad news. The Jekka Group's 45th Infantry Division stationed in the southern 3 prefectures has mobilized in a big way. Their soldiers have entered the city. Mr. Jia bitterly smiled, listening to the voice on the phone and looking at the approaching armed soldiers, his lips quivering without being able to utter a single word. Chikapi watched as the soldiers from the Jekka Group suddenly attacked. The glass dropped from his hands and shattered on the floor, spilling red wine everywhere. Terrified, he quickly called the manor's security, shouting loudly, "What are you doing? What do you want? This is a private manor. Get out of here now, leave my house." No one listened to him except for the security personnel. "Protect the gentlemen and ladies." The security personnel shouted tremblingly, their voices shaky, as they instinctively wanted to flee from the Jekka Group soldiers. But finding a security job here wasn't easy. The benefits were good and the salary was high. If they ran now, they would certainly lose their jobs, not to mention potentially earning the resentment of the powerful, who could easily have them thrown to the fishes. Besides, surely the attackers wouldn't just open fire? After all, these were dignitaries from the southern three prefectures. A death would be a major incident. The security personnel thought this a habitual way of thinking. Although they were aware of the Jekka group, the aristocrats were in current control. These personnel, having grown up here, knew the influence of the aristocrats well, which made them seem more formidable than the Jekka group. Thus, the security personnel were sure that the Jekka group wouldn't shoot, and to keep their jobs, they still valiantly stood in the way. Some security personnel, wanting to show their bravery and loyalty in front of the aristocrats, even pulled out their pistols to confront the soldiers of the Jekka group, hoping for recognition and promotion from the aristocrats after this incident. However, as soon as the Jekka group soldiers saw this, they pulled their triggers without a word. Bang! 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 The sound of gunfire erupted throughout the luxurious manor. On the lawn of the party, several security personnel immediately fell into pools of blood. The nearby aristocrats were completely stunned. The men shuddered, and the ladies let out dolphin-like shrieks as their faces paled. The leading platoon leader, seeing this scene, that the enemy was not surrendering but daring to resist, immediately issued combat orders. Machine gun fire suppression, combat formation attack, bomb them fiercely with the helicopter. Boom! 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 2 armored vehicles started up, their mounted machine guns firing fiercely. The terrifying 12.7mm bullets instantly ripped through human tissue. Many security personnel, along with aristocrats caught in the crossfire, were literally blown apart, their blood staining the walls and the ground. The soldiers of the Jekka group advanced in standard combat formations towards the manor. Snipers took high ground, soldiers covered each other advancing and threw grenades to clear out enemies in dead angles. Upon encountering any security hiding inside the buildings, they immediately called for helicopter fire support. A helicopter moved, its 25mm machine gun mounted beneath the nose firing at a villa. The security personnel hiding inside thought the walls could protect them, not realizing that these ordinary walls couldn't stop the penetration of a 25mm machine gun. The machine gun punched large, face-sized holes in the walls. Those hiding behind them were simply torn apart, and finally finished off with a few 70mm rockets, leaving nothing but rubble and buried corpses. The entire manor was in uproar with gunshots, but it ended as quickly as it began, lasting only 2 or 3 minutes. Because the mansion's security were either killed horrifically or shaking and kneeling in surrender. These handgun-equipped security personnel, how could they stand against a regular army's firepower? Many people were confused and killed under the hail of bullets, while those remaining finally realized what was happening, crying and screaming as they dropped their weapons and knelt, begging for mercy. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. I'm just here to make a living. Don't kill me. Cease fire. I surrender. I'm not protecting them anymore. I want to go home, woo-woo. The security personnel kneeled all over the place, each filled with terror. They thought the Jekka group wouldn't dare to shoot, but the attackers didn't hesitate at all, killing most of them in an instant. To hell with protection, their own lives were at stake. Seeing these Jekka group soldiers using heavy firepower to kill, it was clear they were serious. Who would dare to stop them now? The still warm corpses on the ground were proof of what awaited. The manor, due to the brief skirmish, was utterly devastated, with collapsed buildings, bullet-riddled walls, the pervasive smell of gunpowder, and mutilated bodies strewn about as if it were a battlefield. The aristocrats, seeing the carnage, many wet their pants in fear, their faces pale as they emitted hysterical screams and huddled together like quails, shrinking into a mass. Chikapiai, who had been talking loudly before, now lay quivering on the ground, crawling and squeezing into the crowd, not daring to even look at the Jekka group soldiers. But the soldiers hadn't forgotten about him. 2 of them walked up, ignoring his tearful wailing, and beat him with the butt of their rifles until his head was bloody. Then, like dragging a dead dog, they grabbed his legs and dragged him out from the crowd. Platoon leader, he was the one who called the security and threatened us. The soldier reported loudly to the platoon leader. I didn't. Chikapiai was truly terrified. Gone was his previous arrogance. Seeing the dark muzzles of Jekka group's guns, His eyes filled with uncontrollable fear and his voice trembled as he said, "I am willing to give up all my property, and I will fully support the policies of Jekka Group, never creating any obstacles. Do you think I'm a fool? Killing you, your property would still be confiscated. Besides, people like you turning into corpses is actually the best help for our policy enforcement." The platoon leader, seeing Chikapiai's face smeared with snot and tears, drew his pistol from his waist. "Plea!" The plea was cut short as Chikapiai's head blossomed with a bloody hole, blood gushing out profusely. This top elite in the southern 3 prefectures, who held great power, just died from a single bullet. The other elites, witnessing this scene, couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with terror, truly feeling the ruthlessness of Jekka Group. While the Siam government needed evidence to arrest someone, Jekka Group just stormed into homes and initiated a mass slaughter without any semblance of reason. Jia Wangsunliang looked at the dead and unblinking eyes of Chikapiai, his head buzzing. He had considered that Jekka Group might take action, but had not anticipated it to be on such a large scale. From the looks of it, they seemed poised to wipe out all the elites of the southern 3 prefectures in one fell swoop. "Take everyone away. Those who should be shot, shoot them. Those who should be sent to forced labor in the mines, send them." The platoon leader waved his hand grandly, and the soldiers stepped forward, placing hoods over the heads of these elites and pushing them onto military vehicles. "The Malays are done for." Just as this thought flashed through Jia Wangsunliang's mind, his view went dark as a hood was placed over his head, and he was dragged away by the soldiers, gripping his arm. The platoon leader took another group of soldiers to begin sealing off the manor, coordinating with Jekka Group's financial auditors. They found a wealth of assets in the manor, including an abundance of gold and silver jewelry, land deeds, antique calligraphy and paintings, and even several boxes of the limited edition Tianyuan slimming pills produced by Jekka Group, each costing 49,999 Hua Yuan, totaling hundreds of pills. Though the southern 3 prefectures were economically backward, their elite class was rich to the point of being dripping with wealth, holding a large amount of assets. This scene was not confined to this manor but was happening throughout every city in the southern 3 prefectures. The local Malay elites, deeply rooted and believing themselves interwoven in power regardless of who came, expected to be indispensable. However, Jekka Group was not buying it. With troops mobilized from military camps, they began purging local Malay elites directly. Any attempts at resistance were met with ruthless retaliation and massacring by Jekka Group, including entire families where all adult males were shot. Facing the ferocious forces of Jekka Group, these elites of the southern 3 prefectures were like paper tigers, easily torn apart. The powerhouse support they relied on, police, business, and political spheres, stood no chance against Jekka Group, as their troops easily completed the arrests, pulling out the weeds and bringing up the soil by capturing those who were colluding with them in one swoop. Jekka Group, through practical actions, showcased how ludicrously inadequate the forces that they thought could intimidate Jekka Group were before the military's might. Those who were not compliant faced only one path, cleansing. After 3 days of arrests and purges, the elites of the southern 3 prefectures were nearly wiped out, and a huge amount of property was seized. A significant quake thus shook through the entire southern 3 prefectures. Over 70% of the officials were either arrested or dismissed, and a large number of merchants were imprisoned. The lower-class citizens of the southern 3 prefectures were still trying to comprehend what had happened when the cleansing mission already ended. Following this, without the restraint of those elites, Jekka Group began moving into the locality, taking over government functions and starting to propagate their policies. These policies summed up to one thing: bribery of interest. Jekka Group promised to distribute the land of the rich landlords to the people, along with tax cuts and higher prices on food purchases. They initiated various factory developments, established minimum wage standards as well as overtime and labor protection. The local lower-class Malays' resistance quickly dissipated significantly. Due to the economic backwardness of the southern 3 prefectures where the lower class mainly consisted of farmers, but with a large amount of land held by the elite who also controlled food pricing, the local Malay lower-class farmers had little land per capita and worked arduously, earning very little in a year, merely to be exploited by those elites. Not to mention, Jekka Group's mere act of redistributing land already won over many hearts. Moreover, Jekka Group also introduced its livestock business, encouraging them to raise pigs and poison insect, with Jekka Group responsible for planning and purchasing, ensuring steady benefits without worries. It wasn't that there were no individuals wanting to resist. Among the lower class, some harbored thoughts of forming an independent country, but once discovered, they were sent by Jekka Group for re-education through labor until they reformed. The majority of the population wouldn't think too deeply since Jekka Group's arrival brought tangible benefits. Through this thunderous operation, Jekka Group effectively cleared any opposition in the southern 3 prefectures, and then this cleansing commenced in other Siam-occupied territories, across 12 other prefectures. Although not as violent as in the southern 3 prefectures, they also cleared out a significant number of dissenters. Jekka Group employed the policy of giving dates to collaborators and bullets to opponents, which quickly stabilized these occupied areas. Of course, mainly because these occupied areas were primarily settlements of Siam's ethnic minorities, since ethnic tensions in Siam were acute, they were actually oppressed by the Thais. Thus, although Jekka Group was in the role of an occupier, these people were already oppressed, and now under a seemingly better occupier they had little to oppose. Counting on their deep affections for Siam was impossible. They were not Thais, who are the main body of Siam. Due to the weak resistance sentiment, Jekka Group effectively completed the annexation, turning it into part of Chan country's territory. Jekka Group's purge in the occupied territories did not escape the notice of the outside world. In the modern society where communication is highly developed, it's possible to upload photos and videos to the internet at any moment, and it didn't take long for the external world to become aware. As a result, Jekka Group's purging operations naturally came to the knowledge of the international community. Media outlets controlled by the beautiful country, as expected, launched a verbal and written onslaught against Jekka Group through newspapers, television, and the internet, vehemently condemning Jekka Group's actions. Despite this, Jekka Group continued their operations unimpeded, indifferent to the uproar they caused worldwide. Jekka Group's purges were mainly targeted at the upper echelons in the occupation zone, and the ordinary people were largely unaffected, which was considerably milder compared to the ethnic massacres that specifically targeted civilians. The beautiful country was limited to verbal condemnation of Jekka Group's actions, not willing to send troops themselves, and instead called on other countries to send military aid to the pitiful Siam. But naturally, no country responded. At most they offered material aid and money, with everyone merely observing the situation. Those truly terrified and uneasy about Jekka Group's cleansing operations were the people of Siam who were under attack. They seemed to have seen their own fate in the plight of the elites in the occupied area. Thus, the local elites began to further roll up their capital and flee abroad. But while people could escape, their houses, lands, and factories could not. Jekka Group, on one hand, purged the potential threats in the occupation zone, and on the other, after brief repairs, the main force continued to advance. The large army stationed in Chumphon province began to move north, penetrating deeper into Siamese territory. The army split into 2 routes, one heading north to conquer Baby Prefecture, and Chiang Mai Prefecture, territories bordering Chan country, and another advancing from the northeast direction, heading straight for the Siam capital, Manchester. Starting from the southern military base in Chumphon province, just how far was the direct distance to Manchester? The answer is 121 kilometers. This was a distance close enough for bayonet combat, with the entirety of Manchester effectively already under the threat of Jekka Group's military blades. Manchester was built on the alluvial plains of the delta of the Mekong River, a vast and fertile land which was the fundamental cradle for the growth and expansion of the Siamese Thai clan. But such an area was fundamentally indefensible, which is why Siam had constructed the Karamu defense line. It was Manchester's last barrier, a protective shield, and originally, Siam had hoped that the Karamu defense line would hold back Jekka Group's army and safeguard Manchester's security. But in the end, their plans completely failed. The Karamu defense line did not provide much of an obstacle to Jekka Group, and now Manchester was completely exposed before Jekka Group's advancing forces. As Jekka Group launched their assault, Siamese leaders, on one hand, commanded the army to set up defenses and pile up obstacles, while on the other, they desperately fled from Manchester. There was no thought of standing by the capital and sharing its fate. The force of Jekka Group's army was so overpowering that it encountered little resistance on its path. The armies trying to stop them were either crushed by Jekka Group or surrendered at the sight of their approach. The elites of the Siamese army were nearly all consumed at the Karamu defense line, and now they were either killed in action or taken prisoner. On paper, Siam still had nearly 300,000 troops, but these were all newly recruited soldiers, with the longest training period being just a few months. How could these fresh recruits block Jekka Group's army? Led by the Spider Mecha as the vanguard, on the plains leading to Manchester, all blockades and ambushes along the way were easily pierced through. The recruits' resistance did not pose any hindrance, and in fact, capturing prisoners took up quite a bit of time, which was perhaps the only effect they had in delaying the army's advance. Departing in the morning, and by midday the vanguard mechanized units, the 1st Mecha Combat Brigade, the 3rd Heavy Synthetic Brigade, and the 8th Motorized Infantry Division, had already reached the outskirts of Manchester, with the majestic city within sight from a distance. This city, known as Angel City and the largest city in Southeast Asia, and the second largest in Southeast Asia, was now like a scantily clad, alluring beauty exposed before Jekka Group. Hao Guang sat in the command center modified from a spider mecha, observing the city from high above through the deployed eyeworms. High-rise buildings towered everywhere. The wide roads choked with a huge number of vehicles stuck within the city, unable to move. The crowded masses of civilians, laden with belongings and assisting the elderly and the young, tried to flee the city soon to be engulfed by war. Beyond that, there were also soldiers with panic-stricken faces scurrying about, constructing barricades in streets and hastily modified defenses for urban warfare, preparing for a desperate last stand. This city is too large, and there are too many civilians. If the enemy puts up fierce resistance and we attack with force, it will likely cause a large number of civilian casualties. Hao Guang said slowly, as Manchester covered an area of 1568 square kilometers, with a permanent population exceeding 13 million. Urban warfare is an extremely perilous affair with a high risk for soldiers to be ambushed in the dense cityscape. Alleyways, windows, sewer systems, and other complex areas make ambushes difficult to defend against. Hao Guang was not afraid of fighting. Even if the Spider Mecha entered the city, it would be an invincible presence, and coupled with the accompanying super soldiers, it would surely suppress the Siam soldiers. However, using various heavy weapons in the city to his knowledge due to Jekka Group's swift advance, there were still over 10 million people in the city. To bombard without care would end countless civilian lives. Targeting civilians, the international community's condemnation of the Jekka Group would likely skyrocket 100-fold. Even their allies would oppose them. This was a decision he couldn't make on his own. But just then, a call came through from headquarters. After Hao Guang answered, his previously taut expression relaxed slightly, and he turned to the other staff officers. Commander Su ordered that Manchester be surrounded and that for now, there's no need to engage in urban combat. With this order given, the first troops to arrive began to circle the city. Along with more forces continuously arriving, nearly 200,000 troops surrounded Manchester. Instantly, the entire international community turned its attention here. Since the end of World War II, there had never been an urban siege of such scale. Was it about to begin in Manchester now? We will turn Manchester into Jekka Group's flesh and blood grinder. As many of their men as enter, that many will take down. My brave citizens of Manchester, pick up whatever weapons you have and defend your homes. Let those invading bandits bleed dry and become the new Stalingrad. As long as we withstand Jekka Group's assault, they will inevitably decline from prosperity to decay, and victory will surely be ours. I am your king, and I stand with you. Meanwhile, a video began to spread wildly online. It was a speech by the Siam king, Puping, from the imperial palace, calling for the people of Manchester to fight to the last drop of blood in a passionate and fervent tone. However, shortly after this video appeared, Jekka Group officially released another video. In the video, the royal palace in Manchester was deserted and eerily quiet. Using a pre-recorded video to deceive the citizens of his own country, he had already fled Manchester with his family. Is this your brave king? The video concluded with this line of text. This video caused an uproar across the world, amusing onlookers immensely. What a fearless and determined fight to the end. It turns out that King Pooping's idea of fighting to the last drop of blood was having the ordinary people shed blood. Indeed, the scandal released by the Jekka Group had completely disgraced the Siam royal family. In the face of Jekka Group's mockery, Pooping released several videos in quick succession, righteously stating that he was still in Manchester, had not fled, and accusing Jekka Group of doctoring the footage. You say you're still in Manchester? You can come out at the Manchester City Square to meet with the people and boost morale. Let them see and know there and then whether it's true or false. Jekka Group's response was simple, posting videos that blatantly contradicted him. Pooping's side quickly fell silent, clearly struggling with this demand. So, Pooping could only deflect, claiming that if he were to make a public appearance, he would be assassinated by spies from Jekka Group. However, few believed this assertion. People aren't foolish and could easily see who was lying. Though Manchester was surrounded, Jekka Group hadn't cut off internet access, so the people inside were still able to go online. But one can imagine how the citizens inside felt after seeing this video. Massive demonstrations began, with people demanding that Pooping return to Manchester to fight and resist Jekka Group's invasion, and some directly called for King Pooping to step down. Morale in Manchester plummeted due to Pooping's antics, unstoppable in its decline. After all, while they themselves were still holding their ground, their leader had already fled. It was infuriating. The Siamese people saw through King Pooping's true colors and were greatly disappointed in him. But this didn't mean they had any positive feelings towards Jekka Group. No matter what, the Jekka Group had invaded their country, and the main ethnic group of Siam, the Thais, lived predominantly in Manchester and were very resistant to the invasion, even though not many were truly willing to take to the battlefield to confront Jekka Group. However, many were hostile towards them. It was fortunate that Jekka Group wasn't as brutal as it could have been, for if they had cut off water, electricity, food, and bombarded the city indiscriminately, they could have wiped them out in minutes. A city with a population of over 10 million consumes a staggering amount of resources daily, and they couldn't last long on reserves alone. Jekka Group's 200,000 troops surrounded Manchester while the remaining forces moved on, encircling and decimating several Siamese army units that had rashly attempted to break into Manchester. They then stationed troops around Manchester to continue their attacks and conquests. The Siamese recruits were simply no match for Jekka Group, especially not with the mechanical army involved. Siamese soldiers, already terrified by the spider mecha, would sometimes panic and disperse at the sight of just one such mecha, breaking ranks by the thousands. Under the assault of Jekka Group, Siamese territory continued to fall, especially the areas close to Chan country, which were almost entirely captured by Jekka Group. Who are these people? On the outskirts of Manchester, during the night, Hao Guyu was on his way to maintain the spider mecha with his teammates. As they passed an open area, they saw a group of young men and women pressed to the ground, faces and bodies bruised and marked by footsteps. Despite this, many continued to curse loudly. On the other side, their weapons were laid out, including homemade Molotov cocktails, crowbars, shovels, gasoline, and more. These young ones came to set fires. They're uncontrollable, we catch a group and then another shows up, one said. The guarding soldier, with a cigarette in his mouth, handed one to Hao Guyu and lit it. After accepting the cigarette, Hao Guyu said wordlessly, "I was wondering, it's been so noisy tonight. Are there a lot of them by what you're saying? This is already the 6th batch tonight." The soldier shook his head and chuckled bitterly, a look of helplessness on his face. After Manchester was besieged, the people inside did not stay quiet. They saw the Jekka Group as foreign invaders. Knowing the terrain well, they often ran out to set fires, sabotage roads, and create chaos. The Spider Mecha, as the ace unit of the Jekka Group, was particularly targeted by the people of Manchester, who desperately wanted to burn the mechas. However, such attacks naturally never succeeded. They did not even qualify as harassment, and were merely conversational pieces for the Jekka soldiers during their breaks. "You invaders, as long as you don't leave our land, we will keep coming to attack you every day," said a young Siam man, shouting and spitting bloody saliva towards Hao Guyu, who was among the onlookers. He was quickly beaten up by the Jekka soldiers, rolling on the ground. "Brother, stop, you bastards. Don't beat him anymore," a young girl cried torrentially as she saw her brother being mercilessly beaten. "How old are you to learn to riot and set fires like others?" Hao Guyu squatted down, looking at the 20-something-year-old girl in front of him. She should be in university at that age. "Don't touch my sister. Akitu, run. If you dare to touch a single hair on Akitu, I won't let you off." The group of young men and women were unceasingly scolding Hao Guyu, completely agitated. Hao Guyu touched his nose and asked, "Do I look like a bad guy?" "Pretty much." A nearby soldier could not help but snicker. "All right, stop beating them. Take a few photos and post them online tomorrow so their parents can pay a ransom. Otherwise, send them to the mines to dig for a few months to see if they still have so much energy." Upon hearing this, many of the young men and women looked completely despondent, but some continued to glare angrily at Hao Guyu. The young girl named Akita shouted, "Invader, don't think you can break us with these methods." "Invader? I find it weird you calling me that. Wasn't it your own country who initiated this war?" Hao Guyu blew a ring of smoke into the girl's face, causing her to frown and sneer. "You guys should have internet, right? The evidence we released showed your own king was killed by his people, yet you framed us and started the war. Now you call us invaders." Struck by these words, Akitu was at a loss for words, and after a while, she resentfully said, Even so, you are too cruel. You killed so many of our people and still occupy our land. What do you think war is, a child's game? Losing a war naturally comes with consequences. We need to teach you a lesson, or what if you provoke us again in the future?" Hao Guyu curled his lips, speaking very realistically. Akita's face turned beet red, unsure how to retort. "Think about it carefully. The person you should truly blame is your king, who acted as pawn for the beautiful country and started the war." Hao Guyu stood up, dropped this statement, and left with his teammates, leaving behind a group of young men and women looking at each other in dismay.